Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the 2022 Virtual Wildland Fire Training put on by the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection's Forest Protection Program. My name is Helene Holholzer, and I'm the Forest Protection Supervisor, and I'll be starting off the presentations tonight. Through the course of this 3-hour training, you will hear from 4 main speakers. You'll have the ability to ask questions of any speakers after each one speaks, and we'll also have 2 5-minute breaks included during the training. So before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. Again, if you're planning on viewing this as a group within the fire department, please make sure that your fire department sends a list either during or immediately following the training of all the attendees. And you can send that to deep.forestry@ct.gov. Our Secretary, Sheila Hopeful, is monitoring that email and will be doing that all evening tonight. The point of doing this is to help qualify participating firefighters as registered firefighters. That will give them they'll be considered registered firefighters for 3 years, and for any fire department wildfire reimbursements that are done back to the state, it allows them to be charged to a higher rate for the fire reimbursement. Also, in the training announcement that we sent out, we did mention that we were planning on giving away 4 WIC 100 pumps to various fire departments who were participating in this training. We're still planning on doing that, but due to the logistics of trying to get everyone's contact information and emails and participant lists, we're not going to be able to make the announcements tonight. So we will make those announcements over the next couple days. We'll be contacting individuals or individual fire departments if they're the recipient, and we will plan to be able to drop off those pumps at a later time to them. We will announce all the winners in the spring letter, which we will be sending out within a couple weeks. Please note that our spring letter and all of our correspondence to the fire departments is sent to either U.S. Postal Mail, or if they've provided an email address, it's sent to whichever email address has been given to us by the fire department. So please make sure that your email address is current for fire department communications. If you have any changes that need to be made, they can again be made at deep.forestry@ct.gov. So this meeting and the Zoom question and answers are being recorded, and therefore the participants' microphones will be muted during the presentation, but individuals will be able to unmute when it's time to ask, when they are called upon to ask a question. When you do have that ability, please state your name and your affiliation. And then participants may ask questions through the question and answer feature or use the raise hand icon to speak. During this presentation, the chat function is disabled. So I'm going to turn this over to Amy Richardson, who joins us from the Office of Planning and Program Development, to help explain a little further how to go about asking a question.
Thank you, Helene. Thanks for the introduction. So in order to speak, if you will have to do the raise your hand function. So if you take the mouse of your computer and hover it towards the bottom of your Zoom screen, there's a little icon that says raise hand. You can see the image on the right of the screen here circled. Once you raise your hand, we will see that your hand is raised, and we will call on you in order that your name is displayed during the question and answer periods of each staff member's presentation. I will then give you permission to speak, but you will still have to unmute yourself. So again, on the bottom of your screen, on the left-hand corner of your screen, you'll see the little icon with the microphone that says mute. So please ensure that you're unmuted, and then you can speak. If you choose to write questions in instead of verbally voicing them, again, on the bottom of the screen, around the middle of the screen, there's the Q&A button, and you can open up that pop-up box and type in a question for us to answer. If you have any questions, also use the Q&A box, and one of us will be happy to answer you.
Thanks, Amy. We're very lucky to have Amy joining us tonight. This is a new experience for us doing virtual training, and we have a very large group here, upwards of 400 people, and looking at it through the various departments or as individuals. And so we really appreciate her expertise in helping us do the behind the scenes work, and also managing our question and answer session. So I'm going to give you a quick overview before we get into the real training of what the Forest Protection Program is and what it can do for you and your fire departments. We have two main missions in the Forest Protection Program. Our primary mission is forest fire prevention and control, and we also have a role with insect and disease. We are not I'll be going into detail on some of the forest fire prevention and control programs that we offer. For insect and disease, we're not the lead agency in the state. That's the Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station, but we do play a supporting role, especially when there's large insect outbreaks such as gypsy moth or emerald ash borer. So we're a very small program. We're located in the Division of Forestry. We have 4 full-time employees, and we have about anywhere up to 5 seasonals helping us throughout the year. As I mentioned before, I'm the Forest Protection Supervisor. We also have 2 geographically based fire control officers. Rich Schenk handles the Eastern District of the state, and Amy Burgess has been acting in the Western District capacity. Unfortunately for us, this is actually Amy's last day of work for us. She has accepted another position out in California. So you're getting to meet her or see her on her last official function as a DEEP employee. So obviously we're going to try and get that position filled as soon as possible. So we'll be working on that this spring. We also have Kevin Grady, who serves as our protection forester. And Kevin actually retired in April 2021, and he has joined us again temporarily throughout the last year as we wait to fill his position and to help us keep the programs running. So when we do fill his position, which we hope to happen within the next month or so, then we will Kevin will be around to help train that individual, and then we're going to switch the job class. It's going to be reclassified as a programmatic fire control officer. So that's just to give you a little background as to our program, because we do have a lot of changes coming up. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see numerous grants that we receive in the division. All of our grants we receive from the U.S. Forest Service, and these are what we use to help run the programs and the services that we offer. It's also important to note that Connecticut is a member of the Northeast Forest Fire Protection Commission, otherwise known as the Northeast Compact. And this is a very important organization for us. It's made up of the Atlantic Canadian provinces, all the New England states, New York, and all the federal landholding agencies in the region. And they serve together, this group serves as our regional mutual aid, and is also very important for us in terms of how we get and give our wildfire training. So I'm sharing a map here of what we have for the reported 2021 forest fire statistics for the state of Connecticut. 2021 was not a very busy year for us. It started off active in the spring, and that was probably due to the leftover drought conditions we had from 2020. But then it quieted right down during the summer and fall as we had continuous rain, at intervals enough to keep our fire danger low for most of the year. Some of you may be looking at this. Well, you'll see we have reported 309 fires at 255 acres. And some of you may be looking at this and thinking that, well, this map isn't right because you fought a fire in your town and there's no statistics showing. And we know that our statistics are not good. And this is something we've been working on for years. Unfortunately, we're probably only collecting about 50% of what's actually going on in Connecticut. And the reason for that, the INFRS data that you enter at the fire department, that data has not historically been available to us in a time frame that we can use when we need to get our reports done. And our reports are important to us because it's tied to the federal funding that we receive from the U.S. Forest Service. So obviously having better statistics would possibly bring in more money to the state of Connecticut that then gets passed along to the fire departments. So the only way we've been getting statistics is if someone either tells us by contacting us at the division, or we have been able to reach out to some of the larger dispatch centers and take their information and try and extrapolate from it. It's not a great method, and we want to be doing better. So at the end of 2020, we rolled out a new wildfire app that we're hoping to use to collect wildfire statistics across the state. This app is meant to be used in real time. It can also be used obviously back at the firehouse, but it's supposed to be a very easy method for you to report the data that we need. And if you, depending on your venue right now, you might be able to just scan the QR code if you're savvy with that technology. We also have a link. I'm going to click on the link to show you how easy this is to use. And this link will be actually posted in the chat later. It will also be on this presentation, which we are going to tape and make available on our website at a later date. So if there's somebody, if you want to refer back to it, or if there's somebody who's missed it, they will be able to watch that. And then they can actually let us know they've watched it, and we can we can get their data and qualify them as a registered firefighter as well. So this is what you would get if you click on the link, and then you click onto the little fire picture, and it brings you right into the stat. So you can do this either on a computer or a phone, and we will be sending out the directions for this as well in the spring letter. But basically, it takes less than 2 minutes to fill out. We're looking for very basic information of fire discovery, date, time, address, location, cause of fire. There's some things to toggle down, you know, your town, the ownership, the location. There's a source, you know, you can pick what the cause of fire is. And then some basic information. Anything with a star next to it needs to be filled out in order for the form to be completed. And then we have a few extra things. All of them are for grant purposes, and also so we can get a better handle of what we have going on in Connecticut. So again, that link will be located in the chat at this time, and then also we'll be sending it out later, and it'll be available in this presentation. If you are not interested in that method, another method you can use to get our fire stats is to send anything you have to deep.forestry@ct.gov. And it's important to note this app can be used by anyone in the fire department. It doesn't have to be just one person doing the reporting. So if we end up getting multiple reports of the same fire, or let's say multiple departments respond to a fire and they all use the app, we can actually do some work behind the scenes and delete any doubles or duplicates. So it's not a problem for us if multiple people report the same fire. So in terms of forest fire suppression, some of the programs that we offer is wildfire response and hose exchange. In terms of wildfire response, we have people available at DEEP that we train. We train 80 full-time staff a year and about 50 seasonals a year to be able to help with wildfire response. So you can call our 860-424-3333 dispatch number, and you can actually request any kind of assistance. We can provide manpower, we can provide equipment, and we can provide technical advice. In terms of hose exchange, this is a program also that any fire department can participate in. If your fire department has 1.5 inch forestry hose, if you want to participate in the exchange program, that's basically all you would need. We will exchange dirty hose for clean hose in a bag worth at a time. So 300 feet at a time, you can exchange for us. We prefer to do it back at the firehouse, but we can do it on scene. What we don't want to see is a whole bunch of fire departments lumping all their hose together, because it becomes a mess to try and figure out whose hose is whose, and it never works out the way people think it's going to work out. So what we will do is we will wash, test, and repack the bags, and then we'll just continuously cycle the hose. So there's no guarantee if you're participating and you have your town's or your department's name on the hose, that might not be the hose you get back. So you just need to be aware of that if you participate in the program. We also do a lot of training in the program. As I mentioned, we train all the DEEP full-time and seasonal employees to fight fire in state. We also train the Connecticut Interstate Fire Crew members, which is also called CIFC. We train new recruits every year and returning members for a total of about 80 people. We do department training such as this one. Normally in the past several years, we've done it in a regional format where we divide the state into 4 quadrants, and then we pick a department in each quadrant and give a regional training, and we rotate that area every year. Maybe we'll be going back to that next year. We'll just have to see how things play out and what's going on. But that's how we've been doing it. And we also do other kinds of specialized training. We have a lot of funding in the program that we pass through to fire departments through our volunteer fire assistance program. Departments for towns with a population under 10,000 can apply for a 50-50 match grant of up to $2,500, which means that we would provide up to $2,500, and the department has to match it with $2,500. These funds can be used for training, equipment, and prevention. It doesn't have to be wildfire related, but it cannot be for medical or rescue. We also use these funds to provide cadet scholarships to the Introduction to the Fire Service classes in the summer. We're offering this year $750 scholarships, and that application period's open right now, actually. So each fire department has received that to either whatever email they've provided, or they've received it US postal mail. And those applications are due March 11th. We also use those funds to purchase the WIC pumps that we'll be giving away after tonight's training. So another funding source that we have program is the dry hydrant program. Oh, I should mention that the volunteer fire assistance program is run annually every year, and the announcement for 2022 will be coming out probably in May. It's generally out right around May. And then we have the dry hydrant program, which we generally run every other year. So the next time we hope to run that is actually in August 2022, as long as things go well. And under that program, we offer 50-50 matching grants. And these are in various amounts. There's $1,500 for reparation of dry hydrants. There's $2,000 for new hydrant installation and $3,000 for cisterns. So you will be seeing, if we do plan on, as I said, we're planning on running the program. If it does come to fruition, then you will see those announcements come out to your fire departments in August. And again, this is why it's really important to make sure that your fire department contact information is up to date, because everything we send out via email, or if you haven't provided an email, we send it via the US Postal Service. Lastly, we have tanker shuttle operations classes. So this is some funding you can receive once you've planned a training with the Fire Academy. You can actually contact us and see if there's any funds available to pay for the class. And if there are, which I haven't had to turn down anyone yet, there is, we pay the full cost of the class, which is at this time, I believe, $2,200. So fire weather is one of the services we offer as well. And you can get the fire weather. Obviously you see it on our signs that are posted around the state. You can also go to it get it by going to our website. You could just Google Connecticut fire danger, and one of the first things that'll pop up should be our website, and you can actually look at it that way. And we post that during the fire season. As you can see from this one, the last time we posted it was December 3rd. And then we're going to start it up again in a few weeks as we're getting back into fire season. But if you decide that you don't want to have to check the website every day, you can also sign up for our Connecticut Fire Danger Listserv, which is also found on our website. And there's information on how to actually get on that listserv. And again, you could just Google Connecticut Fire Danger Listserv, and that'll take you right to where you need to go. Prevention materials. We have across the state at 3 different locations. We have Smoky Bear suits that are available for loan to use for any kind of organization or fire departments that have a fire-related program going on, or some sort of a fire message that they're presenting. We also have prevention materials free of charge available to the fire departments. In order to take advantage of these programs, you can either work directly with one of the 3 locations, which is the Joe Bigwood Western District Forest Fire Headquarters in Middlebury, the Eastern District Headquarters in Marlborough, or Patchogue State Forest Headquarters in Voluntown. So I have the contact information there for Marlborough. You deal with Megan Frommer. in Patchogue, you can call and ask for Casey. And right now, while we have the vacancy in the West, you can contact the deep.forestry@ct.gov or the 424-3630 number, area code 860. In 2021, we were able to do, we kind of revamped the whole fire warden program. We did all new fire warden appointments. So every district in the state, and there's 15 districts, has a fire warden associated with it. And that's a nice conduit between the fire departments and us, and they help us, you know, getting our information out, and they help us primarily with forest fire billing reimbursements. So if your department is planning on submitting to the state for suppression reimbursement costs, they have to work through their local fire warden. So that information is available on our website, your contact information, and we will also be sending that out in the spring letter. And on the right is just a list of some of the different charges that you can get reimbursed under this program. And you'll see there is the difference between the unregistered firefighter and the registered firefighter. The Connecticut Interstate Fire Crew is a very popular program that we run. We generally have about 80 individuals a year. And these, as I mentioned before, are specially trained wildland firefighters who are capable of fighting fire across the nation and even internationally in Canada. In order to participate in this program, you have to go through a rigorous 4-day intensive overnight training the first year. And every year you need to pass a physical agility test and go to an 8-hour refresher training. The application period has already closed this year for 2022. But if you're interested or know somebody who might be interested in joining the crew, you can have them send an email to deep.forestry@ct.gov and let them know you're interested in the 2023 SIFSI crew and you want to be put on that interested parties list. And that'll guarantee that an application gets sent to you right around the first of the year in January 2023. Just as a side note, 2021 was a very busy year for us for the Connecticut Interstate Fire Crew. We had people started sending out the beginning of June and had people out continuously through the end of October for a total of 58 individuals. Just a quick note, over the past several years, we have been updating our fleet of fire engines. This isn't all the engines we have. This is just the most recent ones that we've been working on since about 2017. So we have, they're both type 4s and type 6s here. The upper left and bottom right are the newest ones for the Western District. And actually the one in the bottom right, the Freightliner, we just got that online within the last 2 weeks or so. And the upper right and bottom left are the newest trucks that we have added to the fleet for the Eastern District. Lastly, I wanted to mention the Rural Fire Council. This is an advisor group with connections back to the fire chiefs. Each county has one representative. We meet twice a year, and this is a chance for us to hear from the fire departments. This group helps us review our programs. They help us determine what our grant funding levels are going to be. They identify rural fire issues. They've helped us actually with getting all of our trucks, the new trucks done that we've been working on. And they make suggestions on program changes. So if you're interested or you have anything you want to, they should be relaying information back to you at county meetings or whatever type of information channels you have within your specific county. But they should be relaying that information back to you. If you have any questions or anything you would like them to bring forth to us, you can contact them directly. That information is to be found on our website, and also we will be sending out that contact information out in the spring letter. So that's all I have for tonight. I have a minute or two if anyone has any questions. All right, Amy, do you see no questions?
I don't see any hands raised except for Amy's currently. So Amy, do you have a question?
Yeah, I wasn't able to add that link, so I'm not sure what's going on with that.
All right, that's okay. Don't worry about it. The link will be on the website and go out in your spring newsletter, so that's okay. Other than that, I don't see any hands raised at the moment. So if there's no questions, why don't we kick it off to Rich, sorry, Rich.
All right, can you hear me okay?
We can.
All right, so bear with me. I don't work out of my office. I don't have Madonna headphones. I'm gonna try and wing this. This is a presentation we usually do in person. And I hope my fire department is actively sitting there watching it. I hope you guys are doing good up there and miss me a lot. So my background, I've worked for the agency for 34 years in the wildfire arena doing stuff. When I was a maintainer, we went out, my first trip was in West Yellowstone. And I am currently the chief of Hampton Fire Department. And it's about all I'm going to say about my background. So bear with me. You've all probably heard of the fire triangle, and I'm going to assume if there's 400 people, roughly, maybe 500 viewing this tonight, that you have all different levels of experience with fire training and different programs you've been to. The very basic stuff you probably should have learned in grade school was the fire triangle with heat, fuel, and oxygen needed 3 things for fire to exist. We always talk about taking away one of those things and the fire goes out. Well, I've never been to a fire where you just take the oxygen away and the fire immediately goes out. You do something to affect it. You don't go up to a burning structure and knock all the windows out and not expect to get more air and get a bigger fire. So as I go through this, I want you to think about the fire triangle as something that changes and expands. If I had a small fire burning, and I say small, 1 match, and somebody threw a gallon of gas on me as I held that match, there's a good chance maybe the fuel mix would be a little too high, but that would cause a really big fire because you added a lot more fuel. So think about fire in the woods. As it burns into different fuels, it's going to expand. So what I have on this slide here is the fire behavior triangle. So is the fuel fine or heavy? Are we talking about light flashy fuels, pine needles, things like that? Are we talking about piece of paper? If I crumple this piece of paper up, it has more surface area, more of this is available to burn. So if I have a heat source and I ignite this and I know I have a good fire department like 10 minutes away, I can ignite this piece of paper and I got fire. Pretty simple. Drop that in my sink behind it and hope I don't burn the house down. So with that fuel, it's fine, flashy, it's available to catch fire, surface area, oxygen, that fire triangle, all parts were there. If I try and light this piece of firewood with a flame, I can hold that thing on there for an hour. It's probably not enough heat energy from this little hand torch cigarette lighter thing I have to ignite that heavier fuel. So think about the fuel, the continuity of the fuel. What is the arrangement of it in the woods? Is it leaf litter? Is it heavier sticks? What are you talking about? What's going to be burning? And then the key thing with how fires are going to burn is what's on the right-hand side of that slide is the fuel moisture. So right now it's not snowing, but it's going to be snowing shortly. They told me there's going to be maybe 8 inches over where I live in the morning. I'm not going to have a brush fire in town tomorrow. I can guarantee you if the weathermen are right, which they never are. So I don't want to say not going to, but probably if there's 8 inches of snow, I'm not going to have a brush fire in town. If something comes in, probably not going to be a brush fire. So we got to talk about transfer of heat energy to kind of put this whole picture together. So I had that little light coming up. I'll come back with my props. I'm good with props. If I hold that, my hand over it, there was some movie somewhere where a guy was real tough and he held his arm out. And apparently we do have a fire in the sink. My wife's running behind me trying to put the fire out. And I guess I got a sponge burning. So sponges are flammable material. Give me stop laughing. It's not that funny. Tried to make this entertaining. So we have radiation. We have heat energy coming off the sun. You notice it's getting a little cloudy in my house here. I don't need to call 911 yet, but I'm getting funny looks from behind me. So radiation, transfer of heat energy, picture the sun, however many million miles out there, heats my black shirt up, warms me up. It's the electromagnetic waves traveling through light, heating my shirt up. Convection, is heat energy picturing heat going up. So if I had that flame underneath my hand, or if I put my hand over the burning sponge in the sink, you would feel heat rising up. The smoke that's banked up to the top of my ceiling is convective heat carried that smoke and the molecules of particulate sponge matter up to that ceiling level. So picture the woods and a fire burning. This is my picture of a hill. I'm pretty good with PowerPoint here. So if we had a fire on the bottom of the screen here and it transferred uphill, you're going to have convective heat heating those fuels up, transferring heat up to the top of that ridge through those finer fuels that are in the canopy of that trees that we see. So I'm going to show you a video that we made on one of the coldest days of the winter, and kind of summarizing a little bit of what I said.
Right, so we spoke about the fire triangle needing heat, fuel, and oxygen for a fire to exist, and the transfers of heat energy. And just in review, conduction and convection are the two transfers of heat energy that we're most concerned in the wildland environment. Today it's 10 degrees out, it's January, and we have to get a fuel, Class A fuel or a leaf, to reach 451 degrees Fahrenheit before it's going to ignite. So we would need a heat source. Before we actually ignite a fuel, we have to talk about the configurations of fuel and the different types of fuel we're involved with in the wildland environment. The finest of the fuels, grass, very light, fluffy, dries out very quickly. As we get into heavier fuels, more woody fuels, branches, dead branches, live branches. One other rule of thumb when we're talking about fuels is the color of fuels. If you look at the grass in front of me, you'll see some green in there. If it's green, there's fuel moisture in it. If it's brown and cured, it has no live fuel moisture, but it has moisture from the ambient air, from the snow that just fell, from the rain, or any what level of moisture that dry fuel may absorb. The exception of the rule is things that are green in the winter. Eastern hemlock, mountain laurel, white pine. Few other ones that are thrown in there, but those are our most typical. If it's green in the winter, it's very volatile when things burn because of the fuel fuel that's inside the chemical makeup to this plant. If it's green and it's broken off like this branch is, it dried out, that still has that same chemical makeup inside, which will make it very volatile. So dried white pine is going to be a lower temperature to get it to ignite, because you don't have to get rid of the extra fuel moisture in there. And that will burn very readily, opposed to green, where you have to get rid of some of the fuel moisture for that to burn. So with all that fuel moisture stuff, cold air holds less moisture than warm air. I said it's 10 degrees out today, not a lot of moisture in the air, but these fuels have absorbed moisture from the snow that we got just the other day. Some of the snow is melted off. So our finest fuels, grasses, are going to be the first to dry out. And then if you look at these leaves, which are a little heavier, you'll see that there's moisture still in these fuels. So before this would be available to burn, we have to have enough heat energy to melt that off. Now, heat energy can come in many different ways. Let's talk about the sun. The sun is however many million miles up there. It's shining down right here. I'm in the shade. But if I was in the sun, it'll melt some of this snow off and make these a little drier, a little more available to burn. So as we have a fire that spreads through the woods, conditions are changing constantly. And that's why people sometimes have trouble predicting what's going to happen. A fire that's burning, if I'm here and it burns through these leaves and it has enough heat energy to continue, it starts getting into some heavier fuels. And it's going to be, is there enough heat energy produced by the leaves and the flaming front to ignite this? And if so, if that burns up through. Today's a windy day. The wind is taking heat energy. It's taking the convective and radiant heat energy and pushing it. So if the wind's in our favor to push it into here and create more heat energy, it's possible you could get this to burn. If that burns, it burns into some heavier conflagrations of fuels. Fuels that are a little bit heavier in size may become involved in your fire. So if we come back, and let's do a little experiment. I'm going to try and use a single match. And I'm going to see if that single match has enough heat energy to ignite this leaf right here. That leaf will burn, and you see it self-extinguished itself. The heat energy coming off that leaf was coming up. There wasn't a lot of wind when that was burning, but it didn't have enough to continue. Not enough heat energy is going down. It's 10 degrees. So let's take a little bit drier fuel, finer fuel, grass, and we'll ignite that from the bottom. Heat energy is rising up, and you get a lot more flame a lot quicker. If we take the dried branch, we put it on, you'll see the smoke. We get a little more. We're starting to build our own little campfire here. Let's take something with fuel moisture in it and put that on and see what happens. It's not quite enough heat energy produced by that grass to get that starting to, but not quite enough. That's where that smoke and incomplete combustion is coming into play. If I take that out quickly, not enough heat energy around, it's going to go out.
All right, so just to show you, that's the sponge that did not have a lot of fuel moisture in it. That other sponge burned up almost completely. So thinking about fuel moisture, critical as to how your fire is going to burn. So this slide showing a creeping fire, low flame intensities, really slow rate of spread. I could put my foot on the ground, drag it over, and that fire is going to go out. As we get into the size up portion, I want to come back to using descriptive terms. And I used the term here that said slow rate. What is a slow rate? It's hard to describe what something is using a term that's, not very descriptive. Slow could be very different between Amy and myself. Amy would probably be termed quick. I would be termed slow, but you don't know that. So it's hard. It's like kind of in relation. But if I said a rate of spread of 2 feet in a minute, that's very easy for anybody to understand. So a slow rate of spread on this fire that I'm looking at is maybe a foot a minute or a chain per hour if you want to get really technical about it. A backing fire moving away from the heat or against the wind, it could be going down slope, but the heat energy is pushing back into the black, an area that's already burned, and usually going to be a slower rate of spread, usually on the sides of the fire, not usually on the head of the fire unless it's a wind switch and that head becomes a flame. Running fire, spreading usually uphill with the wind or into other fuels that are ahead of it that are very dry. So that's usually the direction the fire is going. If somebody says go to the head of the fire, it's usually where the most intense fire behavior is going to be, depending on what that fuel is in the adjacent area. So, 2 terms. Another term is spotting, and spotting produces embers. They're carried by the convection column. So the stronger the convective heat produced by the fuels in the woods, the larger the embers that'll be carried, and the further the distance they'll be carried with continuous heat. So if we're talking about a fire that has what we're looking at here, trees that are 50, 60 feet tall, igniting, you can see some pretty large spots coming down, and those embers tend to land ahead of the main fire This spotting usually occurs on the head of the fire, and quite often on the head and right side of a fire because of the Coriolis effect, but not enough time to get into what the Coriolis effect is. Look it up if you're interested, but it drops those embers ahead into the right of your fire. So that would be spotting. Torching, often misconstrued with crowning. You'll hear people say, oh my God, we got a crown fire going. If it's single trees or a group of trees, they're burning, fire's burning on the ground. It comes up, as we talked about, it has continuity to burn up, and that heat energy goes up and that single tree torches out. Very different than, crowning. Crown fire is rapid spread through the canopy, usually independent on what's going on in the fire. The fire transfers usually from ground fire to some tree torching, maybe a couple more than a group tree, and then it transitions to the top of the crown. Not something we see in Connecticut very often. We see this out west. You've probably looked at all the videos. It's always California, where Amy's going to work in Yosemite. I guarantee you she'll see some crown fire out there. It's a coniferous forest for the most part in Western US with really steep terrain. And that combination of steep terrain and coniferous forest tends to produce crown fires with the right fuel moistures and winds and things aligned. We don't see it here a lot. Where I have seen crown fire is in the crowns of mountain laurel, which again, in the video I talked about, it has a chemical component to mountain laurel that burns very rapidly, and it can burn independently in the crown of mountain laurel and be a rapidly expanding crown fire. So I'm going to have a quick video here that talks about how kind of that, what I just covered, progressing into ladder.
So something else we want to talk about, we talked about fuel continuity. Is it horizontal, flat on the ground, going, spreading out? Maybe a white pine stand where the needle layer is very thin. That heat energy is going to come up and dissipate and not ignite a fuel. But if you have vertical continuity, where you see here some leaves and some branches have accumulated here, a fire spreading through here may have 2 or 3 inch flame heights. As it gets to here, it's going to be about twice the height. So we could have maybe 2 foot, 3 foot, 2 foot flame lengths coming off of this. You got to think about what's above it. Here's some dead branches. We're underneath a hemlock tree. Is there enough heat energy to start to spread up? And they call this ladder fuel. Just like you climbing a ladder into a window, fire is going to climb up, and as it's burning, it's going to start creeping its way up and get into the upper canopy of trees. That's why you see flame lengths 200 feet out in Western US a lot of times, because it's conifer forest, where we have more deciduous forests here in Connecticut, where that fire has the ability to spread up into the top, and the wind can push that heat energy in tree to tree to tree. So we'll do a little experiment here, and we'll see what we can get. Again, it's pretty cold and these fuel moistures are pretty high, but I'm going to use a little bit more heat energy to try and get some ignition. You can see not a lot of ability for this to spread just because of the fuel moisture again. Get into a little heavier configuration, we'll see where that heat energy is going to start trying to work its way up. You can see that wind is definitely affecting the heat energy and is blowing it, eddying and kind of blowing it towards me. Now the wind is kind of burning into this. And what you should see is the flames starting to climb up to the top of that, getting a little higher, you know, maybe a foot now. You can see the heat energy is burning the smoke. Smoke's dissipating. It's starting to burn this branch here. I can feel the heat warm in my hand, and you can see it kind of working its way up this tree. It's smoke coming off of this is getting rid of a little fuel moisture in there. That wind is pushing away from that instead of into it, so you're gonna losing some of that heat energy. But if alignment was correct, you could get this branch to burn, which could continue up into this, maybe get the bark of this tree going and work its way up. But today, a little too cold, not enough heat energy for that to happen. Somebody may see this and go, oh my God, it's gonna burn into those other leaves. We just did a little bit of an experiment here, and we know not enough heat energy produced from this source of heat to get that fire to spread. So my prediction is this fire is not gonna spread very far on a day like today because it's pretty cold. But if this was April and 70 degrees with a little wind, it's gonna be a completely different situation. So a lot of times in early spring or a winter fire in this situation, if you can come in, you do some suppression work, quick kick of that, knocking that out with my foot, I have no flame left. That will quickly go out. Any of that residual heat left is going to quickly dissipate. If that had been dry conditions, again, 70, 80 degree day with sun on it, there's no way I would be able to suppress that fire in that type of fuel with a simple kick of my boot. If you look at the fuel moisture just in the ground here, that's all frost, moist, and that all adds into what that fire behavior is doing. As it dries out later into the summer and that ground starts to dry out, you don't have that moisture from the ground feeding into the fuels that are absorbing into the fuels. So that's why fires in the spring tend to burn over the surface quickly and go out quickly.
All right, so if you can't tell, I tend to light things on fire quite often, but it's a really good learning tool. And I would suggest in a training environment, controlled training environment, maybe go out and do some very small, like I'm talking very small, like 1 foot, 2 foot circles, and just watch how that fire reacts. Because it really builds your mental capacity to kind of understand what's going on fires. Quite often, we see this time of year, which this photo was taken roughly this time of year, snowed the night before we were going to do a burn. But I'll see fire departments get a fire and they just run out and they got to drag a hose out and put it out. If you can get the flaming front down when the ground is moist, there's still some snow in the woods, maybe a field like this, you could let burn and it's going to burn into a moisture fuel as soon as it gets out of that fine grass field, and it's what we call moisture of extinction. Fire is going to go out on its own. This is just when that field is available to burn. That's what you're going to start seeing, you know, this time of year. Any of these green field or brown fields will start to burn. It's going to be the first fires you get. I think the first fire I heard recorded for this year was in Stonington, and it was in the median down by 95. So I'm sure it wasn't a grass fuel. That's a grass fuel, but it's a little taller and leggier grass. It's called Phragmites. Fire burning in Phragmites can be very volatile. If a fire burns into it, it's usually moist underneath, so it takes like a flaming front to kind of get the energy going into it, but it can continue. And if you look at that, it's an 8 to 10 foot tall fuel. General rule of thumb is flame lengths. The head of the fire will be 3 times the height of the fuel. So that's a head fire in Phragmites with 30-foot flame lengths. That's what you would expect off 10-foot Phragmites. So if you're in one of those shore communities, you have an area like this, there's enough heat energy in that. If that burns into somebody's home on the side of the ocean somewhere or some area that has Phragmites, it can quickly engulf that structure. There's a lot of heat energy produced by a fire of that. Or typically what we see in Connecticut, most of our fires come in hardwood leaf litter. Next picture will be what we see as a typical high fire danger day with fire. There's not a lot of wind involved in this. Burning fairly well. This is probably the head of the fire with 3-4 foot flame lengths. Not going to run my foot through and extinguish that. Amy will get into suppression methods, but then you're going to want to do something probably indirect, or spray some water on it to cool the fire down, or do something to affect one side of that fire triangle. If that same fire was to burn into this fuel, It's a much dry or much more vertically continuous and finer fuel than the hardwood leaf litter. This is where an old beaver swamp was, and the beaver dam washed out. It's been a couple years, and it was able to grow up to sedges and finer fuels. That same fire, there was 2 foot, 3 foot flame lengths. Take a second, make a guess. What do you think for flame lengths? Much more intense fire. So with wildfire, we can make some predictions of where to stop that fire, where we'll have the best method or best attempt to stop it, just based on what the fuel is, where it's burning to, where it's going, pretty quickly. That is, again, white pine. I showed you that in the video, and you see some of this white pine is cured, being brown. It still has the chemical makeup, and some of it is green. A fire burning in this fuel, it's probably 3 foot continuous fuel depths, 4 foot if it was a good logging job. It's the slash that's on the ground and it's dried. What you may not be thinking about is the vertical fuel continuity above this into those other trees. So when we had a fire, it quickly transitioned into those trees. We had group tree torching, pretty intense fire behavior for Connecticut. Going back to that same slide, you got to think of where's that heat energy going, and if it's going into a fine flashy fuel such as the trees, you can see my mouse up into these, it's going to just candle right up that tree and work right into the crown of those trees. All right, so I gave you a whole bunch of fire behavior stuff. Just going to quickly look at my time. I think I'm a little bit ahead, so I can get into the initial attack and size up process. It's kind of that planning phase, which we don't do a lot of in the fire service. We're very reactive. We're really good when the pager goes off and we get a call to go out and put water on red stuff, and we're really good at that. We're not as good at planning ahead of time. You'll see a lot of departments will have pre-plans that they may pull out once a year, dust off. They may be doing a drill on a large factory in town. But that size up process, at least with Wildland, can start right now. You can start anytime and think about it. When I drive around the woods, and I'll show you another video with the size up process, and we'll talk a little bit, but I'm thinking about tomorrow's snow on the ground. I don't have to worry about it. I know it's Amy's last day today, and now immediately I'm thinking about having to go to fires in the western part of the state and what's my response time and all these things that go into your head as a pre-plan. But I know I'm not going to have to worry about it tomorrow if we get snow on the ground. But as we dry out, we warm up, that snow dissipates. I can quickly look at the fuel, think about what the fuel moisture is. Maybe I signed up for the listserv Aline mentioned, and I'm getting my daily fire weather, or I went to the DEP website that she listed, and I get the daily fire weather from there, and Smokey's hands on something that's pointing to a high fire danger day. And I can say, okay, today's a day we could get a fire. This is what that means. So hopefully that info gathering starts early and adds to a good plan, and you don't forget it when the tones actually go off for a brush fire. You should know where you're going in town, and you should know what the fuels are there if you live in town before you even get there. So if you have a street address, you should have some preliminary idea of what to expect for fire behavior based on weather, wind, and all the conditions. So the next video I'm going to show you kind of goes through this time of year with the snow on the ground and kind of that size up process and how I kind of think about things.
So if you look at the right side of the road, you'll see heavier amount of snow and into the woods, you know, continuous snow. Then if you look to the left side of the road, you'll see that snow isn't as dense there. And the reason behind that is the aspect of that. If you can see up to where that patch of sun is, if we go forward a little bit, the little signpost is, that's getting a southern exposure, and the sun being what it is, moving in the southern hemisphere, it's shining down, but it's warming up this side of the road quicker. And the fuels will be a little bit drier on this side as you go. So even though the snow may be still there, once it's gone, the higher fuel moisture will definitely be on those northern aspects where it doesn't get as much sun. What you see on the other side of the road here is an old agricultural field, and the state bought this so it wouldn't be developed. You can see a state land boundary tag there. And the early successional plants that come in are grasses, sedges, thicker stuff. There's vines in there, there's greenbrier. You can see the cedar and juniper, the green stuff that's in the back of that field. All that green, very volatile fuels. Kind of as you move along, we'll go down the road a little bit, you'll see that fuel probably about 4 to 5 feet continuous. Now you get into some heavier stuff in this vine that continues up into the treetops. All that, when we talked about ladder fuel, becomes ladder fuel. So on a windy day in those early successional fields, you can get easily 20, 30 foot flame lengths. As it gets into those cedars, maybe even higher fuel. It may be short duration, but those areas, much harder to control a fire when it's burning in fuels like that, opposed to shorter grasses or everything, because it's continuous. You can see kind of the thickness of that fuel type. All right, so as we're driving down the road, we're looking at a cool grass field. And the Europeans came in and to feed animals, planted cool grass, where the original grass was warm season grasses, similar to what you see on the edge row here. And the cool season grasses for forage are the best. You can get 3 or 4 cuttings of hay off of these fields. And that's a lot of what you see around here. Would that burn? Yes, but in the spring, that greens up very quickly. So a field like that has dried out because of the winter would be available to burn. At least the thatch on the underneath of it would burn. But it quickly greens up in the spring and becomes a buffer, an area that wouldn't burn. So as the season changes, everything else changes. And as you come in here, you'll see what's happened to most of Connecticut is your agricultural land turned into developments. So these old fields would be houses now in a lot of areas. Here you're going by a little cornfield. Cornfields typically aren't going to burn. If they were standing corn in the fall, they might. And you have all these little patches of thick areas that didn't get mowed. The fields and the land is always in Connecticut going to want to revert to forest. But what we have here is a lot of homes. These were built in old agricultural fields. You can see not a lot of trees or timber in the area. But each one of these homes could be threatened by wildfire depending on what type of fuels are around them. Here you see some ornamental grasses that people plant next to their homes. The green shrubbery, all that ornamental grass, that's very volatile stuff. If you see this stuff right in the end of the driveway, where you see that stuff further up in the yard close to the house, if there was an ignition source and that was to burn, you're going to get 10 or 20 foot flames off of that little patch of grass, and that could easily cause your house to become part of the fire. If you look on the back side of that field, you'll see other grasses cured in the winter months. Here you got some green deciduous stuff that goes up. This house probably has a good 20, 30 feet of mowed grass around, so it's probably going to be safe, but depending on the other stuff. So in this home here, you can see lawn hasn't been mowed in a few years, and you've got grasses continuous right up to the edge of that house, and those are the houses that become very vulnerable when there's a wildfire because it's continuous fuels right up to the house. So what I'm going to show you here is a typical urban interface situation that we have in Connecticut, where it's not 100 homes that's going to burn with a fire, but isolated homes that are vulnerable because of the fuel types around them. So this is just hardwood leaf litter intermixed with some white pine. Very typical place we may have a fire in the spring of the year. Could be in the summer, any time. And if you kind of progress through here, you can see easily how that fire could spread through the shrubbery in the yard. And if you see here, there's just a continuation of shrubbery right up to this home that's behind that shrubbery. And what you see at the base of that house is a lattice fence that is under a deck. Continuous dry fuels right up to that lattice deck. So any fire that started would easily spread into that and consume that house. You can see just around the barn and outbuilding of that same typical vegetation very close to the residence, where the next door neighbor has defensible space, a green lawn, very small shrubbery around their home, no chance of that house being involved in a fire. So to keep those fuels cleaned away from your house, 30 feet of defensible space with non-combustible fuels is huge to protecting your home. Right here is a warm season grass. It's a little blue stem. You can see the kind of the furry little tendrils on the grass. That's probably our first fuel that burns as soon as the snow melts off. And then as you go here, you'll see, we're just gonna cruise. So a fire starting here on the edge of the road could quickly spread through that grass. It could be a spark from exhaust from a diesel pickup going through a regen or something to that effect. And that grass can ignite and then spread. And what you see on the backside of this grass is a commercial Christmas tree operation. So that's a value at risk that if you had a fire that was burning there, you want to stop that as quick as you can to minimize the loss for this Christmas tree farmer. And all those Christmas trees, you can see he has it pretty well mowed underneath, but fire definitely would carry in the spring of the year under there and could cause a lot of damage to a farm like that. So that's somewhere you may make a decision. We need to stop this fire very quickly because of values at risk. So if you look,
There we go. So a lot of information, kind of a recap of what I covered, but that size up process really is just what I was doing. Drive around your local areas, take a drill night while it's still light, drive around, get a feel for the fuels, to have those discussions. What would this do? Where would this burn? Where would we make the best attempt to stop this fire? Sometimes the safest method is to let a fire burn out of a bad area. If you look back or thought back in the video where I showed you where the state land piece had been bought, it was all reverting back to forest and really dense. Not a good place to try and catch a fire there. But if you let it burn out of it into a more of a mature forest stand, that fire again is something where you can attack it. The flame lengths will drop down below 2 feet and you'll be able to get in a little closer and work on a direct attack on that fire. But you pick your battles. You can't do that with a structure fire. I can't go, wow, I just pulled up to this residence dispatch and I got a fire in the kitchen, but my God, that kitchen is cluttered with stuff and there's a lot of debris. I'm going to wait here until it burns into the living area, but there's not very much. There's just a couch and I'm going to remove the couch and hope that I'm going to save that house. In the woods, you can definitely do that. You can pull up and say, yeah, the fire is really active here, but it's going to burn into this, greener area where it's going to burn into this old cornfield. It's probably going to go out on its own. You can make some pretty good determinations of where you're going. So what you see in this slide are 2 bridges. And I was the guy in the fire department, and it's a lot easier when I'm looking at you all and I can see people look at the guy standing next to them or sitting next to them. I was the guy in the fire department that got a blue light at 16 years old and drove way too fast to all the calls. I went to a sick elderly female, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, maybe midnight. And the barn doors where I parked my truck to keep it ready to roll blew shut as I was driving out. And I had an old F-100 pickup with the fenders that are the bumper that seemed to stick out a little wider than the fenders. Well, I hooked both the chains, ripped both barn doors off. I didn't even slow down. I had to get to that call to help this woman. I was the youngest, EMT, and I was just raring to go. Now, if I get a sick elderly female and I'm probably thinking I want my guys in the firehouse, I might not even get out of bed at 2 o'clock in the morning. I got a pretty good crew that's going to respond. I slowed down a little bit, but I also got a lot wiser. So if you look at this bridge on the left, you got to think of risk versus benefit. If you're going to a box alarm, if you're going to a brush fire, if you're going to something that probably isn't life-threatening, are you driving across that bridge with one of your trucks? No weight limit on it, it's a dirt road. Maybe you get out and look underneath, make a determination, maybe you say we're really going fast. It may be a different situation if you got a report of people hanging out of a second floor window with first floor involvement, and you know that you can probably get across that bridge quickly and save their lives. It's a different risk versus benefit. I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm telling you, I've seen some really dumb driving and dumb mistakes because people get overzealous going to a fire. The bridge on the right, I don't think anybody would want to walk across that bridge, but I took that picture because they were driving UTVs across it because the fire department just had to get into that fire and they had to do it on wheels and they needed to get there. Think about those bridge structures. Think about the hazards you may be creating. That's that same picture a little closer up. Not all that safe looking. And if that UTV rolled over into the stream, now we got another problem. We got a UTV underwater. I believe the town of Sterling is watching. And I think they might have had a UTV go underwater. And again, I take no responsibility for that. But these things do happen. And these bridges are something that we face all the time. That is not Scotland Fire Department for those around because they are Station 16. That vehicle went across. Maybe they took their hose out of the thing to make the truck lighter before they went across. Was not quite sure why the hose was out of it. Next slide, a little more impressive. You got a guy in your department that is going to take your engine across a bridge like that. Have a talk with them now. In all seriousness, you know, these calls we go to, most of them for brush fires are not life-threatening, and you got some discretionary time to make good driving decisions. When Kevin gets into his section, I'm sure he's going to talk about firefighter injuries and fatalities. Driving's a leading cause of that. If you are responding to a box alarm or a brush fire and you take out a family going to church, motor vehicle accident, it will change your department. So take this seriously. Driving, take the time. It's just a brush fire. It will be there when you get there. So I am not all that technical savvy. I'm okay. I have one of these smarty pants phones, shows me what time it is, does a couple other things I can talk on it. The younger techier guys, within 20 seconds or less, they can pull up a map of where you are standing immediately with a pinpoint of where they are. Utilize these tools that we have, pull up a map. It's so common to get to a brush fire. People will run in, make a decision. We have to attack the fire. We're firemen, we have to attack it. We have to put it out. If you take a few minutes to pull it up, you can get a map of the fire, you can see where you are, and you can make some really good decisions. If you can get some topography in there, shows wetlands, shows buildings, you can get, you know, all kinds of stuff at the fingertips right there on a smartphone. So if we look at this fire, you will see that these black lines are roads, although I can't see it up on my legend. The red line is the DEP forest property. So this is a forest boundary. On this heavier red line is the actual fire perimeter. So it's a 23-acre fire, pretty large for New Fairfield. Right now, if I pull this map up and I wanted to make a determination of where to attack this fire, there's a couple things that just jump out at me. Where this red line, where the fire edge, it went down into a drainage and it kind of stalled. And if you think about this, if you look at the topography lines, this is all going uphill towards the top of the page. It's all upslope. And this is a drainage where wind and heat energy are funneled. It is the worst possible place to try and establish a fire line because wind and slope and everything is just fighting you. If you go the scale down here, 250 feet, this is roughly 250 feet. We have a road here. If you were actually standing on that road, you could see that that was going to a subdivision. and it was a wide, at least 30 feet wide gravel road, plenty enough to stop that fire. So this was a fall fire. Yeah, it's going to smolder in the ground, and it did for a while, but much easier to let that fire naturally come out to this road or even help it along if it's taking too long. But by trying to lay a hose line down here and extinguish that fire on the edge, it's really just not a good choice. But if you didn't take the time to pull a map up to look at where the fire is going, where it is currently, where am I, and get this information, you may just get tunneled right in and start working at the heel of this fire access. You come in here and you just start laying hose and going at it and not really look at what your other potentials are. And if you get 3-4 departments of mutual aid all doing that same thing, it's really tough to pull them out after they've engaged for time and say, okay, we're going to drop back and let it burn out to this road. They're going to wonder, what was that? So these early decisions on a fire can really save you a lot of heartache later on. Okay, I'm getting close to the end here. Another size up. We talk about green fuel moistures. If you look at this, the green deciduous forest is green. This is late May. This is a mutual aid call in my in our mutual aid district area where we operate in Hampton. We went into this fire. It was going to be raining shortly. There was a thunderstorm coming. It had been a little windy prior to that. And we got called for mutual aid to a remote fire, and they asked for our gator. And, you know, all these fires, a lot of gators show up, UTVs. He responded in there, and I didn't ride in that thing. Some of the other guys rode in, and I walked in. And I remember walking in wondering, why is this fire burning? It's so green. It shouldn't be all that much of a fire if it's anything. Don't know what's causing that heat energy for this fire to be able to burn. As I got a little closer, I saw that all this green, so I'm going to go back to that, all that green stuff, a lot of ferns in there were black and brown and burned. And I'm like, this shouldn't, unless you poured fuel gasoline on that, that shouldn't happen. So it immediately starts raising your questioning of, why is this happening? People were engaged on the edge of this fire and doing suppression work and spraying water, and UTVs were going in and out. And what you're going to see next is something I want to just ingrain in your head and think about this. Why didn't we kill somebody? This right here is a down power line from those primary wires. It goes like this, goes through the green ferns. It was laying here, and it was burning and arcing, creating that heat energy for I don't know how long before we ever got called, because it was fairly remote. And immediately, this is where we accessed. There was UTV tracks over this down wire. I don't know how many thousand volts of electricity. It was a live wire. And luckily, nobody was killed on that. So we notified immediately everybody on scene that there was, you know, the down wire. Stay where you are till we can identify what's going on. Power company came in and cleared that. But when you get that tunnel vision, don't take a good amount of time to size it up. It really costs you in the end, and it shouldn't cost a firefighter's life. But unfortunately, this happens all over the country. There's electrocuted firefighters quite often. There was a firefighter that'll always stick in my mind where there was a down power wire. They were all sitting on the wire on the side of the road on a windy day, watching the wire like we all do every time the wind blows. We go out and we watch traffic till power company gets there and fixes the problem. And they got a brush fire that was about a half mile down the road. Same power line down the road that they were working on. It had contacted the cable fence, cable guardrail, all the way back, started the fire. That's where the fire found a source where it was going to burn. 3 fires went under that cable, and it was back when the bunker coats had hooks on the front, metal hooks, if anybody remembers those days. And one of the firefighters' metal hooks contacted the bottom of the energized fence. They knew the fence was energized when they made the decision to crawl underneath it, because they were on the same wires down that was draped over that fence. Why they got the tunnel vision, but it killed one firefighter and injured another. Tragic loss. Those things shouldn't happen. It's just a brush fire. It'll be there when you get there. So that concludes everything I had for fire behavior fuels. I will give you guys a second for any questions. And I'm going to stop sharing.
Hi, Rich, this is Amy. We did have one question in the Q&A from before. It came in a little late, and the question was, when do you think the spring letter will be coming out? So I don't know, Helene, if you want to answer that, or anyone chime in.
I'll take that. I'm hoping that we will have the spring letter out in 3 weeks. And maybe sooner. I'll give us a little buffer in case.
That sounds great. Thank you. Other than that, so far we have one hand raised. Bill Avery, I see your hand is raised. I'm going to give you permission to talk. Please unmute yourself and state where you're from and go ahead and ask your question. Bill, are you there?
He's still muted, Amy.
Right. He needs to unmute himself.
Hello?
We got you.
I own car 12. This is Red from Canterbury.
Hey,
How you doing?
good.
Yeah. Hey, do you know if they're gonna, is the state gonna I should say pay the local firefighters and stuff for their time for fires and stuff like that?
Yes, Helene went through in the very beginning, the Wardens program, but just to recap, all fires, whether they're state land or on anybody's land, are reimbursable by us for your time, equipment that's out there based on
Okay.
established rates. So those are out there and we will be, but it has to go through one of the fire wardens. You go to
Okay.
the Deep website, or you can contact me later, and I can get you that information.
Because I haven't seen that in quite a while. We used to leave forestry hose out there, and that you guys usually come and pick it all up and everything. I don't know if you guys do that anymore or not.
Yep, we are, and we'll still come do that. So just either call myself, see me on the fire, but we'll take care of you.
All right, Rick. Well, thank you. Now I gotta figure out how to unmute myself here. Huh? Turn that on. Okay. How did I do? Good?
I'll
Wait a
take care
minute.
of you, Bill. Don't worry.
All right. Next.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I don't see any more hand raised at the moment. So I believe, Helene, that you wanted to take a 5-minute break.
Yes, we will take a 5-minute break and we will be back promptly starting at 7:27. So we'll see everyone then. All right, we're going to begin again.
Amy, before you start your presentation, I have 2 more questions in the Q&A. So we could take care of those quick before you get started. The first question is, what email should the roster be sent to?
That can be sent to deep.forestry@ct.gov.
Okay, thank you. And we do have an individual on. Should they also send their acknowledgement of attending to that email address?
Yeah, if they've already turned in, if they registered as an individual, and included their fire department name so we know where to send it to, then if their name and fire department have been turned in, they should be okay. It's just more for the group presentations where we only have one email address listed, so we need to know all the participants who were on that email.
Okay, thank you, Helene.
So I'm Amy Burgess. I'm the Western Forest Fire Control Officer until we're done with tonight. A little bit of background, I started in South Meriden Volunteer Fire Department as a volunteer firefighter. I ended up in Maine to pursue my bachelor's degree, which I entered into a class that introduced me into wildland fire. From there, I found that wildland fire was a little bit better than structure fire. So then I ended up out in Oregon. I went back to Maine to work for the state. I ended up in Florida for a little while before coming back home to Connecticut. And now, as everybody has mentioned tonight, I'm headed up to California. So I do have an extensive background in wildland fire, along with I am working on my master's degree in fire as well. So tonight I'm going to be talking to you about suppression methods, the different type of suppression methods we use in wildland fire, along with different mop-up methods, along with some patrolling. So tonight we have a video that the Force Protection Program has put on a couple years ago. If you've taken this training, it is the same one, but it definitely still has some very pertinent information on it.
When most people think about fighting fires, trucks, hoses, and water come to mind. But with forest fires, a control line is used as the primary method of suppression. A control line includes all constructed and natural barriers and treated edges used to control a fire. A hand line is a type of control line where all fuels are removed, exposing the mineral soil. Hand line construction is the primary method for controlling a forest fire. The success of an initial attack is based on how well the hand line is located and constructed so that the fire cannot cross it. One basic rule for fighting fires is to fight aggressively but provide for safety first. When responding to a forest fire, you must first be properly clothed in personal protective equipment such as lightweight Nomex clothing, helmet with shroud and goggles, leather gloves, boots, and if your agency requires, a fire shelter. When arriving on scene, first identify escape routes and safety zones.
The escape route is going to be the control line that's been created. Back to this as a staging point. If it becomes unsafe past this area, we'll all progress out to 171.
An escape route leads to a safety zone. A safety zone is an area void of flammable materials where firefighters can go and be safe from a wildfire. Recently burned areas, parking lots, water bodies, and ball fields can be safety zones. However, the area must be large enough to keep firefighters a distance of 4 times the flame height from any flammable materials. The next step is to appraise the overall fire situation and determine appropriate control actions. Take into account how the fire is currently reacting and how it will react. Identify safety issues and values at risk.
I'm on scene. Incident size at this time, it is approximately 4 acres, repeat 4 acres in size. It is uncontained. Best access for you is off Route 171 coming in on that access road flagged in red. Weather conditions, it's been dry for this past week with no...
This process is called size up and must be ongoing until the fire is fully extinguished. Go around the flanks of the fire as quickly and safely as possible, or inspect it from a vantage point. If the fire is rapidly moving, don't go around the head of it.
Radio check, test, test.
Another important aspect of safety is communications. All personnel responding to the fire should always remain in contact with one another. Handheld radios are the preferred means of communication.
Water coming back to you?
That's affirmative, he's refilling.
The purpose of constructing the hand line is to cut off the fire's fuel supply by clearing flammable materials that allow the fire to spread, usually leaves, twigs, and a thin layer of humus. Sometimes thick duff is encountered, especially in pine and hemlock stands. Duff is partially decomposed organic material of the forest floor beneath the litter of leaves, needles, and twigs. It sometimes consists of a thick mat of tough fibrous roots and is capable of carrying fire. Putting water on a deep burning fire may appear to knock it down, but the smoldering duff below may cause it to rekindle. The use of a hand line is superior to using water alone to stop the spread of fire, especially during drought conditions.
I'm just gonna take a walk around and see if I can find any better control for you on that north side.
Determining the location of the hand line is very important. Always anchor the hand line to a barrier or other control line. Barriers can be natural or man-made. Examples include trails, roads, streams, rocks, or old burns. When deciding on where to construct a hand line, fuels, weather, and topography must be considered. Take advantage of man-made or natural barriers and make them part of the line. Make the hand line as short and straight as possible. Avoid sharp angles as these tend to intensify the fire activity. Avoid high-hazard fuels such as mountain laurel and logging slash, leaving them outside the hand line when possible. Once the hand line is located, construction can begin. One way to construct a hand line is called the progressive method, where crew members using different tools advance together without changing relative positions in line. Allow enough clearance in between to provide safe working space for each member. The first crew member should have a cutting tool. A chainsaw is the most efficient. Trees, brush, and logs should be removed only as wide as the hand line. Normally, live trees greater than 4 inches do not need to be cut. Personal protective equipment is required when using a chainsaw, including eye and ear protection, chainsaw chaps, and protective footwear. When cutting saplings, make horizontal cuts as close to the ground as possible to avoid leaving sharp edges. Cut down snags and low branches that overhang the line as soon as possible to avoid the spread of fire. Scatter all the cut brush, branches, and logs outside the hand line. However, if this material is partially burned, place it inside the line. A backpack pump is used to knock down flames, allowing crew members using hand tools to work directly on the fire's edge. As the other crew members follow behind the pump, they use scraping tools and rakes to expose the mineral soil. All flammable materials must be removed in a strip wide enough to prevent the spread of the fire. A leaf blower is an efficient tool to remove leaves from the line. Eye and ear protection should be used when using the blower. Direct the blown leaves outside the hand line. A rake also works to remove leaves. A Pulaski efficiently cuts through roots and stubborn duff. Cut duff with a mattock or hoe end. To prevent fire from creeping through dead roots, uncover and remove roots under the hand line. Once the duff has been cut, rakes or Pulaskis can be used to roll the duff back, exposing the mineral soil. The progressive method of line construction utilizes all tools to dig the hand line down to mineral soil. As the crew works and moves along as a unit, each person adds their share to the line as they progress. No passing or crowding is permitted. A safe working distance of at least 10 feet should be maintained between workers. A recommended lineup might be flagger, sawyer, swamper or brush thrower, leaf blower, backpack pump, Pulaski, scraping tools, and rakes. During initial attack, the crew should concentrate on establishing a good hand line and stay out of the interior of the fire.
State Forestry, McGuire, command.
Go ahead, Command.
I'm just walking down your west line. Looks real good, looks like it's holding nice.
The hand line should be no wider than necessary. As a general rule, the width of the hand line should be 1.5 times as wide as the dominant fuel is high. The usual width of the hand line cleared by chainsaw is about 3 or 4 feet, but the width of the rake line that follows is seldom half that distance. If you arrive at the fire undermanned, as few as 2 or 3 people can construct a scratch line. A scratch line is an unfinished preliminary control line hastily established or constructed as an emergency measure to check the spread of the fire. Initially, this line does not have to be scraped down to mineral soil to stop a running fire. However, the line should be improved as soon as possible. For a 3-person crew, a recommended lineup might be leaf blower, Pulaski, and rake. Once the fire has been knocked down, work should proceed to improve the hand line that was just dug. The idea is to secure and hold the line by vigilantly patrolling to prevent any slopovers, suppress any spot fires, and extinguish any overlooked hotspots close to the line. Only after a good hand line has been established should the crews begin mop-up along the edges. During mop-up, available water should be used to ensure that the fire will be contained.
I want to do an after-action review because we can always improve on our abilities to fight fire. What went right, what didn't go so well, and what can we do to do better? We'll start with you.
When we flanked it and hooked around the top, it got a little hot, so if we had more backpack pumps, it would have helped tremendously.
I would concur.
Remember, get the hand line down to mineral soil. Secure the edge before working toward the inside of the fire. And, most important, fight fire aggressively, but provide for safety first. Our forests are a precious resource, so to keep them clean, remove all flagging and trash before you clear the scene. For more information, contact the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection's Forestry Division.
Okay, so there are 3 different types of handline construction: direct, indirect, and parallel. So for direct, you're going to be digging your handline directly on the flames. This is pretty difficult to do without getting any of those embers or flames to your uncontrolled burn side. So I don't really suggest using this direct flame method. However, it is possible to do it. The textbook says you can dig line next to any flames that are 4 feet or lower. I don't know about you guys, but if you ever had a campfire and you've had at least like 4-foot flame lengths on your campfire, you know that it's pretty hot. So I don't know how we can work consistently next to that kind of flame length. So that handline construction, I don't really recommend. Another one that we can see is indirect handline. This is more used out west in the western states like California. What you do is you dig your line a distance away from your main fire, as seen in these pictures. However, you should call us to Deep Forestry to assist in the next step. What we would do is use our drip torches and we build a controlled fire, which will eventually burn into the main fire. That removes all the vegetation away and it actually controls that fire edge further away from your line. We did have to do this in North Windham a couple years ago. We had an area that we had a fire, but it was in a snag patched area. So it wasn't safe for firefighters to go in. So what we did was we created a indirect hand line with dozers and stuff. And the next day we put drip torches in there and we burned a controlled line to the main fire, and that helped extinguish the fire. Our last one is what we usually see here in Connecticut, is called parallel. What you do is you dig your line pretty close to your fire, but not directly and not that far away as indirect. So what we would do is dig pretty much a straight line, so you don't have to follow all those fingers down in the right-hand corner of your screen. And then if we call it like a dirty burn, if it's not completely burned or it leaves a lot of pockets and it's not cleaned edge. So what we would do is grab our drip torch again and then make that line a little bit cleaner. One thing that I didn't hear being mentioned in the video, but we want to be pulling our debris away from the fire, not adding it to it. So move your debris to your green side is what we call it. So some of the hand tools that we would be using to dig these hand lines would be shovels, Pulaskis, McLeods, swatters, put that in there for Kevin, but we don't really use those too much here anymore. Rakes, leaf blowers, and chainsaws. So usually you put your shovels and, your chainsaws and your cutting tools, like your Pulaski, to clean out that area first, make sure that the big, large branches and logs are removed, and then you go back in with your scraping tools, such as your combi tools, your shovels, make sure that you get that down to the mineral soil, and then follow that up with your rakes. With your rakes, you can clean that little debris that's left on your line, but really your rake should be pushing that berm that you just created of leaves and debris that easily can catch on fire away from your line a little bit further. What the concept is if your flame length comes to your, or if your fire comes to your line and your flame length is pretty high, that flame length can fold over your control line and ignite that berm on the opposite side. So the best way is to just push that berm away so that's not a chance of possibility. Here is a little video that we created in the field that same cold day that Rich had his video, so bear with me in this one.
So there's several different types of hand tools that you can use on the fire line. The most common is the Pulaski, named after Ed Pulaski from The Big Burn, good book. So what you're gonna do is you're going to either use the axe edge for cutting or your grubbing edge for digging in the ground. So when you're gonna start your hand line, you wanna use your cutting tools first. So what you wanna do is you're gonna hit the ground and pull back. Hit the ground, pull back. Make sure that this hand is sliding so you have ease, so you're not gripping totally onto your tool, which is going to make a very long day for digging hand line. You're going to be gripping, moving as you're digging your hand line. Usually it's a step and go process if you have the multiple people to dig your hand line. Next common hand tool is the combi tool. You have your regular shovel edge, which you can use this rugged edge for cutting. You have your scraping tool edge. But with the combi tool, what is cool about it, you have your grub pick edge as well. That helps you get into your root systems if there's a little duff in between your roots or your rocks. So this will be going behind the Pulaski, just again, making sure that you have ease with this hand. Just dig, go, dig, go, dig, go. One thing when you're digging your hand line, if your fire is that way, you want to pull your debris away from your fire, not adding to it. Everybody's favorite is the shovel because Smokey Bear's iconic hand tool. But instead of just using it as a regular shovel, in the hand tool world of Wildland Fire, you can use it as a scraper, a grubber, a smotherer. You can throw dirt on fire if you need to. So what you're gonna do with the hand line, you're just gonna come back and you're just gonna scrape. And lastly, when you're done with your hand line, you're gonna use a rake to clean up your last bit of duff and your leaves. Your typical hand line should be about a foot in width. Probably 2 is easier. And then make sure that it gets down to the mineral soil. So some safety rules to keep in mind with is do not swing your tools in close proximity to another. There's a good chance you might hit that other person. Don't carry your tools over your head. Make sure you carry them down at your waist. Watch what you're doing with the tool and your surroundings. You don't want to hit your neighbor. Ensure your tool head is properly secured on your tool handle. You don't want your Pulaski head flying off your tool handle. And always wear your PPE. Today I wasn't using my PPE just because of the cold and this demonstration, but make sure that you are wearing your gloves, your safety glasses, your boots, long pants, no mix.
Okay, so one thing that I didn't mention is leaf blowers. In Connecticut, we have an abundance of leaves in our woods, and that it can be a very helpful tool to use to make hand line very quickly. However, we have to be careful when we're using leaf blowers. It's very easy to just blow an ember across your line and compromise your whole work that you just did. Another suggestion that I usually make is have your shoulder perpendicular to your fire. So that way you are making sure that that nozzle end of your leaf blower is blowing away from your fire, or at a 45-degree angle. Another thing is, I don't know if you guys do this when you're leaf blowing for regular yard work, but you get so tunnel visioned in what you're doing and where your leaves are going, you don't know what is going on in your surroundings. So one thing you need to make sure when you're using your leaf blower is you know that what your fire is doing at all times. It may be distracting to figure out where your leaves are blowing, but you need to make sure that you have an eye on that fire and your surroundings and your other firefighters. And if you use radios, make sure that you can still hear your radio. Safety is huge. So I've said this a couple times already in the video, but your width of your line should be 1 foot of at least of mineral soil being dug, and then 3 feet of being cut with your chainsaws, with your Pulaskis or whatever. And that is all dependent on your flame lengths as well. But usual general rule is 3 and 1. So in Connecticut, we are not flat, we're not Florida. So we have hills, we have slopes, we have downhill, and things roll downhill. So one thing that we can do when we're digging our hand line, we can build a cup trench, or a V trench is what it's called. So that bottom downside hill of your line has to be a little bit higher than your black. So then it's like a catcher's mitt and it catches everything that rolls downhill. However, using this method, you always have to check it to make sure that either it's working, and if it is working, great. However, we still have to clean that out so it continues to work. So just make sure that you are periodically checking it, going back, cleaning it out, making sure that works. Another thing with downhill stuff is we have logs and they burn, and they will burn downhill. So if you see a log and it's burning or it's in your black, just turn it perpendicular up and down with your slope. So that way it doesn't roll down easily into or past your control line. So one thing in New England and Connecticut we are blessed with is water. We have water practically everywhere. And if we don't, we have a creek somewhere nearby. Sorry. So one thing that we can do is use this little portable pump. Either call us with Deep, we have them. We can hike this in very easily. It's way lighter than the Mark IIIs, which we also have. And we hike this into a remote area in the woods where we can dam up a creek, or if there's a small puddle or one of those old fire ponds, we can draft water out of that and make sure that we have a water supply near our fire. So there's 2 different types of hose lays that we use in the wildland fire setting. Here's another video that I talk about.
There's 2 types of hose lays that in wildland fire uses. The simple, which is usually your booster line being directed towards the fire and putting that out, and the progressive. The progressive hose lay is what I'm going to be talking about. So first you're going to be taking your 1.5 inch, which usually comes in those red bags that Forestry Division gives out or does the hose exchange with. You're going to connect that to your fire truck. You're going to spread out about 200 feet of this 1.5 inch. When you get to your 200 feet of 1.5 inch, you're going to add a Y. You want to add your reducer 1.5 inch to inch towards your fire. That way, when you are charging your line, it doesn't get disconnected or upside down and twisted. Next, you're going to connect your inch. This is going to be your lateral. Your 1.5 inch is your trunk line. You could do this in several different places to attack the fire in several different places using multiple people. Next, when your inch is in line, you can continue your 1.5 inch for another 200 feet and doing the same as adding another gated Y and then connecting it. You can finish your hose lay by adding one of the nozzles towards the end. When you are done with initial suppression of the fire, you can add a garden hose, which is a 3/4 inch hose with a reducer and another smaller Y. This way you can have multiple people mopping up Our guideline is using one person on the nozzle and using multiple people digging in the ground for mop up.
Okay. So there's two different types of methods of attack using an engine. Usually we see these more out west, but we could use them as long as you have the pump and roll capabilities on your trucks or your brush trucks. Your mobile attack would be using your one brush truck with one person driving and one person fighting the fire, your mobile pump and roll. The main person would be putting out the fire directly and driving around the fire and making sure that that edge is out. The tandem, you don't really see that too much here, but it can be used more in like the grassland areas or fields where you have one engine pump and rolling and one person suppressing the main fire. And then you have another truck behind it, making sure that it mops up whatever the other engine didn't get or anything that rekindled. Again, we don't really see these too much here, but they're good to know. Other methods of attack that we can use in Connecticut, but we don't see them very often, is we have a helicopter doing water buckets, and we can do a dozer line with line construction. We have used that one in North Windham, was the last fire that I know that we used that on. So that is suppression. I'm going to be talking about mop up and patrolling. Sorry. So the fun part of suppression is over. We have to mop up. It's just as important as suppression. It might be even actually more than important than suppression. What happens is during mop up, we forget all of those little embers that can rekindle the next night or a couple days later and restart your fire. So we need to make sure that mop up is complete. So what we want to do is we want to start as soon as possible. This can even happen, especially like when in the Western states, it's the same time as suppression. Here we could do it too, being simultaneously if you have enough manpower. You want to start as soon as possible, making sure that you have that controlled line. Just because you have a hand line dug doesn't mean that it's actually controlled or put out. Next, you want to work from the perimeter inward. You don't want to have that stump that's burning in the middle of the fire be put out before an ember that's threatening your line put out. So what you need to do is just get on your line and work inward. Usually we want to chain in, which is 66 feet to start off with, and then we can work our way spiraling around the fire to make sure that it is out. I have this theory, it's called bug to light syndrome. A lot of firefighters tend to seeing a burning stump or flames and not noticing the little embers on the side, and they're like glued like a bug to a bug zapper, and that's not a good way to start fighting your fire or doing mop up. It doesn't mean anything. That stump isn't going to go anywhere, and it's a tendency not to start a fire across your line. So things to consider when you're mopping up. A lot of people, this is very tedious, a lot of hard work, and a lot of people get tunnel vision while they're doing mop up. But you still need to be considering what your weather is doing, if there are winds picking up, what your fuels are doing, is there a good chance for a rekindle on your fire? If that firefighter, a couple people away from you, is taking pictures and posting on social media and not really realizing that the flaming front is coming back at them. So you need to make sure that you have some considerations and some situational awareness going on still when you are mopping up. Next is snags. Connecticut is completely filled with snags everywhere. Wherever you go, you can't go to a woods and not see a snag. We have them because of emerald ash borer and gypsy moth. So snags can be a huge factor in mopping up. Like I mentioned with the North Windham fire, we ended up making our perimeter a little bit bigger just to keep the firefighter safe. Your safety is number one. The woods can come second, especially snags. So with fire loves snags. So it can easily go up into the trunk of a snag and burn out, and nobody knows that it's burning until a little teeny tiny flame starts poking up on top and starts shooting embers across your fire line and igniting your control line on the other side. That happens. I've seen it. It's not great. So what happens is you either have to cut that tree down or remake your hand line around so you can consider that little buffer of vegetation. Just make sure that you are safe around snags. It's very hazardous out there. Another thing that we can do while we're mopping up is bone piling. When it's the witching hour of dusk and Chief is saying, hurry up, we gotta finish, it's getting dark out. What we can do is grab all those logs, those branches, anything that's burning, move them in the 66 feet, one chain, make a campfire, is basically what you're doing. During the night, it will burn itself out. So next morning, you either have minimum or no embers that you need to mop up. This also helps clean up the edge, take those hot materials away from your control line so you have no threats or minimum threats to your line overnight. Two different ways that we can do mop up. Like I said, Connecticut is lucky with water. We have water everywhere. So we are able to do mop up a lot easier than a lot of other states. Again, in the video, I did mention this, but when you are using water, make sure that you have one person on the nozzle and 1 or 2 firefighters digging. You don't want to be watering the garden and just having that water on that top surface layer and it not doing anything to the hot embers underneath. So make sure that when we are using water, that we are digging in the ground. Dry mop up is when you basically have no water. So what we're going to end up doing is scraping the charcoal off the logs, off the branches or whatever, finding some mineral soil, mixing that up and smothering those hot embers. Another thing we could do, Connecticut has a lot of duff. It really starts like hard to put out. So what you can do is with gloved hands, put that duff in your hand and just rub it together and you're smothering that oxygen and the flames and you put that hot out. Luckily, like I said, we don't have to do mop up, dry mop up very often, but it is hard, it is tedious, and mop up is definitely one of the most important parts of wildland fire. Now there is going to be a 4-letter F word that I'm going to say, so please don't get mad at me. Foam, everybody's favorite right now. But Class A foam, it makes water wetter, lowering surface tension. Now you're going to say, but we're in Connecticut, we can't use foam. Well, technically we can. We can't use PFAS foam, which is found in your Class B foam, which cuts the oxygen to a flame and repels carbon. It can be absorbed into firefighters' bodies and accumulate for long periods of time. It causes severe health issues, including cancer, liver failure, and it contaminates the environment in the air and the water. Class A foam, on the other hand, lowers the surface tension, making water wetter. It attracts the carbon, it's biodegradable within 14 to 30 days, it's non-toxic, and reduces the amount of water needed to extinguish a fire. However, it does corrode your pump and tank. So make sure if you are using your Class A foam that you are rinsing out your equipment right after that wildfire. So after you think mop up is done, we have to cold trail. Cold trailing is firefighters get on all fours and start digging through the dirt. We have to make sure that all hot embers are out. You put your hands in the dirt, get a little dirty, and make sure that everything is cold before you can say that it's actually out. Gridding. If anybody has done any search and rescue, you know what gridding is about. It's the same concept. So you have a bunch of people line up, space out evenly, and search either in the green or in the black to make sure that there is no hot spots or there is no sparks across your line. Usually communication is key to making a good grid search work. I've seen it firsthand that if people aren't talking, people get mad. So make sure that people are talking when you are doing a grid search. And patrolling. So how long are we patrolling for? Right now we're seeing, if we are in a drought season, a couple days to a couple weeks to even a couple months. So make sure that if you are going to be patrolling for a little while, make sure that you're done at either huge measurable rainfall or a lot of snow. We've even had a mop up in snowfall. So it's not truly out until discretion says it's out. Two different types of tools that we can use while we're patrolling and monitoring and doing mop up is our infrared camera and drones. So drones is one of the hottest topics right now. It seems like out west, we can use drones a little bit easier with the open canopy. Here in Connecticut, we've used it a couple times, but honestly, I haven't found it too helpful. What we can use it as is just trying to find where the smoke is to get us closer to the fire, but we really can't see what the fire behavior is actually doing with a thicker canopy. But we do have that tool available. And another tool we have is infrared cameras. So I know most of your fire departments have infrared cameras to go inside. Have you ever thought about using them in a wildland fire, especially during mop up? That hidden embers underneath the surface, you can't see with your eye, but your infrared camera can pick that up pretty easily. With deep forestry, we have infrared cameras, and we do have survey flags that people see in their yards if they're fertilizing or whatever. We can go around your fire and find your hot spots, put a flag there, and when your firefighters are working, you can easily know where your hot spots are, and they're reusable. So when the hot spot's gone, you take it and then you return it. So thank you for listening to my suppression, mop up, and patrol. If you guys have any questions, you can drop that in the Dropbox. I have the email up because, like everybody said, tonight's my last night, so you won't be able to contact me directly, but the deep forestry people will definitely be able to help you.
Okay, so far we have one hand raised. Marshall, I see your hand is raised. I'm going to allow you to speak and you must unmute yourself, and then you can ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, so I'm with Muddy Brook Fire Department. So on our forestry, we have something called wet water. I'm not sure if that's the same as Class A foam, but would that help put out smoldering duff?
I'm not familiar with that product. If it is not PFAS, then and it is supposed to be like some sort of foam, it would definitely help with duff. I know duff is a pain in the butt to extinguish on its own, especially with water, and with foam, it makes that permeate a little bit easier. So if it is foam and along the guidelines of the state, I would say that that would help.
Gotcha, thanks.
Okay, next up we have Matt. Matt, I'm going to give you permission to talk. Please state where you're from and unmute yourself.
Hey, Amy, this is Chief Canoyer from South Meriden Fire. We're all very proud of you, and we're all here wishing you the best.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, it doesn't look like we have any more hands raised at the moment, and we have no questions in the Q&A box. So again, Helene, I believe a 5-minute break is planned for the time being.
Yes, Amy, it's 8:07 right now, according to my clock, so we will start promptly again at 8:12. Thank you. See you all then.
Something on the side there, like, I don't know. All I see now is your name blacked out. Helene, that's a. We can start.
Okay, let's go for it.
Hi, my name is Kevin Grady, and I had the last section, and I guess we saved the best for last. And fighting wildland fires, in our case, it's grass fires, brush fires, is an inherently dangerous job, and that's why we need to do it with safety in mind. As you can see, this is from 1910 to 2018. We have wildland firefighter fatalities from coast to coast. Granted, most of them are west of the Mississippi,
Next heaviest would be the southeast, but we definitely had some fatalities in the northeast in our hardwood leaf litter. So something to think about, and the reason to focus on safety. This is kind of an interesting graph. It starts when they started taking statistics on fire fatalities with the Great Fire of 1910, which we call the Big Burn. And then for some reason, there's a 15-year gap where they didn't take any statistics. And then the U.S. Forest Service started back up again, collecting statistics. But the thing, if you look at the graph, you see over the decades, up until recent years, although this only goes up to 2010 or so, 2011, the trend hasn't changed all that much. Wildland firefighters are still getting injured and killed out there, although there's been several attempts to change that. And the first attempt came after the 1956 fire season, when the chief of the U.S. Forest Service, Chief McArdle, they had a bad fire in Southern California, the Inaha fire, and a crew of 11 was burned over and killed. And so the chief said, enough's enough. We got to do something. We got to, do something to get these numbers down. And so he commissioned a task force to look into the previous 2 decades of tragedy fires. So they went and looked back from 1937 through 1956 to see what caused these fatalities and what they could do about it. So they came up with the 10 standard firefighting orders in 1957, and we'll go over them now. A lot of you are familiar with these already, but it's good to review them. And these are orders. These are things you're supposed to follow. Back in those days, the U.S. Forest Service was paramilitary, and it was up until like recent decades, but it was that way for a long time. So when they adopted a lot of the military philosophy on things, and so these came as orders, things you must follow. And the first one was keep informed on fire conditions and forecasts. We've heard already from Rich and Amy about fire behavior and fire suppression and how important weather influences are with when we're out there. And even in Connecticut, we have a lot of cold fronts that come through in the spring. And those are always interesting because there's going to be a wind shift. It's a guaranteed wind shift, and you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of whether the front's coming fast or the front's coming slow, and that's usually it depends on how great a temperature difference there is when the air mass is moving in compared to what's overhead. If it's a big difference, then it's going to be a strong cold front. You'll have stronger wind gusts and faster moving winds that'll come into the area. So you got to be informed of the weather because that makes a big difference, obviously. Next one was know what your fire is doing at all times. So you have to have eyes on the fire. If you're not watching it personally, you have to have an experienced, trusted person with good communications watching the fire and relaying what's going on to you. And that kind of information needs to be passed around to everybody who's working on scene. Base all your actions on the current and expected behavior of the fire. So when you arrive on scene, you do your size up like Rich was talking about, and what's burning now? Is it grass burning? Is it going to be burning grass for the rest of the time we're here, or is it going to bump into the woods and then go up the hill? And what's going to happen then? And we know fire burns faster uphill than downhill, and so make sure your tactics are consistent with what the job is ahead of you. And you really should have an escape route. It's pretty much nowadays, you don't go into the woods unless you figure out where you're going to have an escape route to a safety zone in case things go bad and you have to pull people out of there. And so, again, an escape route should be picked out by someone who has a lot of experience with fire, and usually you flag it so people can find it. And when things are hopping and they're quickly looking to get out of an area, that it has to be easy to find. And you're supposed to time it before you need to use it. So someone says, oh yeah, we can do a fast walk down and get out of here in 6 minutes or 8 minutes, whatever it is. So that's very important to time it before you need to use it. So you'll know whether as you're working, if you're out there on a bigger fire going into a longer period of time, you'll realize, hey, we're getting farther and farther away from our escape route. And so it's going to be longer to get there and use it. And there's a possibility it could get cut off. So we need to have another escape route. So anyways, those are important. We need to have them. If you don't have them, you really shouldn't be going into the woods. Post lookouts, they found on these when they did the review of those tragedy fires in those 2 decades to come up with the orders, that there was a failure to post lookouts when there was possible danger. And so if you're dealing with some pretty heavy fuels and pretty windy, dry conditions, it's good to have eyes on a fire, and a person that's experienced, knows fire behavior, knows weather, and they can keep an eye from a good vantage point on the crew or crews that are out there, as well as with where the fire is located, to see the progress of the fire in relation to where the crew is located. Next one was be alert, keep calm, think clearly, act decisively. This is when things start to heat up or get really increase in intensity, maybe a little bit of crowning or torching is going on. And so you see a smoke column being developed, and people are starting to get a little excited. And so you have to be alert, so you are aware of these things changing in the fire environment. And it's up to you as a leader, or even if you're just a firefighter out there, to not panic, keep calm, and make sure your leader sees, if you're not the leader, make sure your leader sees what you see, that the fire is picking up in intensity, or the winds are picking up, or whatever that is going to change the conditions that you're working in, and change it negatively, or make it more hazardous to you. Then make sure that that's being communicated to your supervisor. Oops, sorry, going the wrong way. Communication is a very, very important on the fire line and in everyday life, whether it's at home or at work, your normal jobs, and especially on the fire line, because there's so much at stake. And so you have to maintain good communications with your people and your supervisors, and it's a bigger fire, there's more mutual aid there with those folks who know who is located where, what they're doing, and if what you're doing might impact them or what they're doing might impact you. It's just communication is very critical to safety, safe operations. Next one, give clear instructions and ensure they are understood. Well, this is easy because we're operating on our incident command system, and we know that when we operate under the incident command system, we speak in clear text. So there's no slang. We're not using acronyms or whatever. We're using clear instructions. So everybody who hears us on the radio or on our cell phones, we're talking to folks, they know what we're talking about. And the best way to know if somebody understands what you are asking of them is just simply to have them repeat it back to you. And that way you can be 100% sure that they got the assignment, that you're telling them where to go and what to do when they get there. So give clear instructions and ensure they understood. It's kind of piggybacks on communication. So very important one. And when things do heat up, or when everybody wants to go chase the big flames, as Amy was saying, and sometimes the big flames are in the middle of the burn, and while the fire is expanding in the perimeter, even though it's not really expanding slowly, it's still expanding. The fire is getting bigger, but we're chasing flames in the middle of the burn that are going to just burn themselves out. Oh, you have some of those people, rein them in, and you know who they are, and you also have people that wander around on the fire line, and or freelancers. You know who those folks are. Rein them in, keep control of them. Because they can get themselves hurt, they get other people hurt. Last one, and I just found this out recently, just kind of preparing for this talk, was this last number 10 was added by the chief himself in 1957. He said, fight fire aggressively, having provided for safety first. And that's pretty interesting. It's a good one. And that's when the one everybody remembers, at least they remember the first half of it when they're quizzed about the 10 orders. So those were the 10 orders. And it was a good start, and there was more to it, to that. It wasn't just the 10 orders. They came up with some plans for doing fire behavior research, and adding subject matter experts, and having a standardized training nationwide. That was the really beginning of it, but the best part of it was this 10 orders that came out of that. But unfortunately, people, as you saw from the graph, were still being hurt and killed on wildfires nationwide. And so in the 1960s, late 1960s, something came out called the 13 situations that shout watch out. And interesting enough, no one's like sure who came up with them, but they think they came from Southern California, a hotshot crew there. That's where the best guess is where those came from initially. So those were around till 1987 when they became the 18, and they dropped the situations that shout watch out and just called it the 18 watch out situations. And it was also a time when NWCG came out with a program called Standards for Survival. So they changed the name, and they changed it from 13 watch outs to 18 watch outs. And that was to help firefighters stay safe. And here are the 18 watch outs. Now, these watch outs are not orders. Remember, the orders are things you're supposed to follow, you have to follow. These are situations that you might find yourself in. And if you do, it doesn't say not to work in these situations, but if you choose to do so, you have to mitigate them and have a plan to deal with it if things go wrong. The first one is you arrive on scene and a fire is not scouted and sized up. Well, that is a definite watch out. So you need to fix that. You either do it yourself, you go scout it yourself, or you send in somebody, an experienced person to size it up, let you know what's burning, how big it is, what values are at risk. If you get called into a fire, you arrive and the people have been working all day and they've already gone home and you didn't get a briefing, then that's a watch out situation. So you just proceed slowly, make sure you got proper equipment, headlamps, and if you can find somebody who's working that fire that day, then you want to grab them before they go home and say, hey, where are the areas of concern? What do I need to watch out for? So that's a watch out. If you arrive on scene and no one tells you where the safety zone is or where the escape routes are, then you don't go in the woods. You say, hey, I'm not doing anything until you tell me where my safety zone is and where the escape routes are. And are they flagged? Have they been timed? Where are they? This one isn't all that critical to Connecticut unless you're near the coast. If you get on a mutual aid, you go down to the coast to help out on a fire, then they have sea breezes down there that sometimes get strong enough where they can override the local winds that are forecasted for that day. And so you can have a wind shift based on a sea breeze, a very strong sea breeze that happens to develop in the afternoon. So that's where this one might apply. Otherwise, it's mostly a Western thing. We don't have a lot of freelancing anymore because we have really people have bought into the concept of staging areas. So when you go to a fire, folks check in and they go to a staging area if they don't have an immediate need for those folks. So freelancing on the fire line where you don't know where folks are or what they're doing, that's kind of not true anymore, or not true so much anymore. But if you have people out there that are unaware of what others are doing on their part of the fire, then obviously there's a potential there for bad things to happen. Uninformed on strategy, tactics, and hazards. Here we go with communication again. Instructions and assignments not clear. These folks really don't know which way to go, and if they pick the wrong way, then the best thing to do here is to get on your cell phone, get on your handheld portable radio, and find someone who knows what's going on and what you're supposed to be doing. this is kind of an easy fix. This one, maybe not so much. You find yourself separated from your crew. Your radio's batteries have died. You don't have any extra batteries. Your cell phone, maybe it's in the same boat, or maybe you just don't have cell service. And that is you need to do an immediate fix. You need to get up to some high ground and at least find somebody else that maybe can help you out. That's a bad situation to be in. That's a definite watch out. Constructing fire line without a safe anchor point. Now, if you decide you're going to construct fire line, it's a lot of work. It's hard work if you do it right. So you really want to anchor any fire line you build. That simply means starting your line tied into something that's not going to burn, like a dirt road, the edge of a brook, something that's not going to burn, something that the fire can't hook around and get beyond your line. If you put in these little check lines, we call them, they do that in other places where they don't have enough people initially to get in there and put the put a good line in all the way around the fire. So they put in check lines just to slow the progress of the main front of the fire. And so that's where you would see this a lot. But when we decide to put a hand line in, we're going to anchor it, and this will not happen, or hopefully not be not. We really have to spot over our line. It's then to lose an anchored line. Building fire line downhill. Amy showed you some stuff about rolling debris downhill. If you have, well, no, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. This one is a little bit different. Here you're building a fire line downhill, and the reason we build fire line downhill is because you can build line downhill so much faster. You can build like twice as much line. So if you have a lot of line to build, the temptation is to build it downhill. But if you have, smoldering fire down below you, then you have to think about this. Is it a good idea or is it a bad idea? And that's going to depend on what time of day it is, what direction that slope you're on is facing. If it's the afternoon on a southwest slope, you don't want to do this. That's a bad idea. If it's earlier in the day and you're on an east slope or north slope, then yeah, go for it. You can get a lot of work done. And if it's a little iffy, you want to post a lookout. If it's really iffy and it's an important piece of line to get in, you're going to probably plummet with a hose lay and have a lookout. So doesn't mean you don't do it. Just means if you're going to do it, make sure it's smart and make sure you build in some safety into what you're doing. Frontal assault on fire, that's tempting because if you can get in there and get that fire line around the fire, you can keep the fire small. That's the carrot out there. The problem is over 4-foot flame lengths, there's just too much heat there. It's not safe. You got to back off, either do the parallel attack like Amy was talking about, or drop even further back to the indirect. So it's a watch out situation. You have to think about how smart it is to do it. And it's all about risk management. So if you're doing indirect attack, you're going to have unburned fuel between you and the fire. That's just the way it is. Now, the problem is that you think back to Rich's fire triangle. Now, this is the fuel side of the fire triangle. And he talked about, think about, adding oxygen to the fire. So you have more wind, a thunderstorm coming through, or some sort of dry front coming through, with increased winds, cold fronts coming through, increased winds. There's more oxygen going to be added to the fire, then that's one thing. Here you're adding fuel to the fire, which can also make the fire burn more intensely, hotter, faster, and preheat the other fuels out ahead of the main fire. So you want to post a lookout. Always a good idea to post a lookout with these watch out situations. Keep an eye on it and see if stay there as long as you can, get as much work as you've done. If you just put in like a 1-foot line and that baby has the potential to blow, a 1-foot line is not going to stop that anyways. So you might want to drop back even further and not waste your time, because the chances you're going to lose that line in that situation outweighs that benefit. Number 12, you cannot see the main fire and not in contact with anyone who can. All right, another goodie. So you don't have eyes on the fire, so you don't know what the fire is doing. You don't have any other crew members around who have eyes on the fire. So not a good situation. And in this case, the animals seem no more than this guy. You need to change that. You need to fix that right away. If you don't have a radio, then you surely know where your escape route is, because you shouldn't be on the fire without knowing where your escape route is. So I would just, if you couldn't fix this situation, then I would say you need to get out of there. Number 13, on a hillside where rolling material can ignite fuel from below you. This is where Amy's cup trench comes into play. So, but you need a pretty big cup trench to stop that rolling along that's depicted in this cartoon. So when you have slope, like you have some pretty good slopes in Western Connecticut, you have some little slopes in Eastern Connecticut, but gravity is a pretty powerful thing. And if you have some burning debris up above, whether it's an old stump, logging stump, or down timber that have been there a long time, they're very, very dry, and you're in the middle of a drought, and so they're tinder dry and they catch on fire. At some point, they're going to let go and start rolling down the hill. And so if you have fuel down below you that's also dry, and you have this burning thing, it gets past you and goes down the hill, well, you're in a big world of hurt, because as I said earlier, fire runs faster uphill. And so you're on a slope, you need to get out of there in that situation. And we're putting some pretty good cup trenches or something that's going to stop burning debris from up above if it rolls down on you. Number 14, weather's getting hotter and drier. Well, so here's a couple ways to look at this one. If weather's getting hotter and drier, then that's going to work on fatigue of your firefighters if you're in charge of some firefighters. So you need to worry about keeping them hydrated and making sure they're not getting too fatigued. And the other way to look at this is if they're getting hotter and drier, then the fuels are getting hotter and drier, and they're going to be more available, and they'll burn with greater intensity and greater velocity. Number 15, wind. Wind is the big game changer on fires. When wind increases and changes directions, usually bad things result. The fire takes off and blows up, spots further and further out ahead of the main fire. So that's something you have to keep a handle on. And so that's what, make sure you have good weather forecasts. You can get spot weather forecasts from the National Weather Service. They're pretty good about it. Even if you're not a state entity or agency and you give them a call, they're pretty good folks to work with. They'll get you a spot. You give them the information, they give them a lat and a long, and you can do it online. Nowadays, it's pretty painless. So that's how you mitigate that one. Getting frequent spots across your line. So if you're having to waste a lot of time taking care of spot fires, and so it's slowing your progress down, then you probably need to call timeout and say, hey, this really isn't working out, folks. We need to move, relocate this line, and we need to drop back and rethink our strategy and tactics. Number 17, terrain and fuels make escapes to safety zones difficult. Yeah, you've been assured that there's a flagged escape route. You can see there's a flag there, but nobody cleared it with a chainsaw, and nobody timed it to see how long it was going to take to use it. And so you have a problem there. This is easily mitigated before the fact, not so easily at this particular time. And last, number 18, taking a nap near the fire line. And I always ask people, kind of, how many people think this is a bad idea? And they usually get a lot of people raise their hands and say, yes, this is a bad idea. And I say, no, I think it's a good idea. I've taken naps on fire line. The key is not everyone takes a nap on a fire line at the same time. So if you're on a big fire and it's going into multiple shifts, it's fine to take a little nap and catch up, or to just lie down for a little bit if you're fatigued, and have a drink of water and have a sandwich or whatever while the other folks are working. Nothing wrong with that. All right, so unfortunately, that didn't change the graph either. We're still having people get hurt and killed on fires. And in 1990, there was a bad fire in Payson, Arizona. And it was the Dude Fire. And there was an inmate crew on the Dude Fire that was trapped, and they popped their fire shelters, and unfortunately they popped them in a bad spot. Fire shelters don't work everywhere, and most of the inmate crew perished along with a correctional officer. And so there was a gentleman on that fire who was a longtime firefighter. He's a hotshot superintendent. He had a long career with hotshots, the name of Paul Gleason. And Paul Gleason had been on a previous fatality fire in the 60s called the Loop Fire in outside Santa Barbara in Southern California. And Paul Gleason, on the day of the Dude Fire, which he was on, that he said he vowed that he would find something that would make it easy. Because at that time it was like list of 50 things, safety lists, the 10 watchouts, or the 10 orders, the 18 watchouts, and there was a 7 downhill line construction guidelines, and there was 4 common denominators of tragedy fires, and other lists of things. He says there's too many things you have to memorize. So he came up with 4 things to memorize. He says, if you can remember these 4 things, then you should be relatively safe on a fire. And if LCES, L is lookout, C is communications, E stands for escape routes, S safety zones. So if you have good lookouts, experienced people with good communications, keep passing the information, intel about what the fire is doing, and how, if things are working or not working, if you need to make adjustments, pass the word. And then if things still aren't working and it's time to get out of there, where the escape route is located, is it good? Can your crew get out to a good safety zone? Those 4 things: lookout, communication, escape routes, and safety zones. If you maintain those 4, you should be safe. And so we added, again, the curve didn't change a whole lot. So we added the concept of situational awareness. And that's just you as a leader, or even as you as an individual firefighter, being, knowing what you're involved in on the terrain, the fuels, what's going on environmentally with the weather, winds. And as Ron Burgundy says, you got to keep your head on a swivel. So look around and take everything in to stay on top of your game. And if you are a leader, and you have to know where your people are at all times and what they're doing, are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? Are they okay where they're going to be? We have hazards in southern New England and Connecticut. Amy talked about snags. We do have a lot of snag areas now, thanks to the 2016 historic drought, followed by some other dry springs in the following years, as well as gypsy moth defoliations that finally took the lives of a lot of the old oaks and hickories in the main canopy of our forests in eastern Connecticut, and so in isolated places of western Connecticut. So there's a lot of snags out there. They're known as the silent killers. You don't hear them because there's no leaf litter, or leaves that make noises. The trees are coming down. And reefs and snags. Snags get punky and throw embers. If they're not near your line, you should try to get them cut down as best you can. We have poison ivy. You also have poison ivy. That's the same tree, just different time of year. You can still get poison ivy if you touch that. Contact dermatitis, right? We are old here in New England. There's a lot of where old homes were that were built, in the 1800s. There's cellar holes, and every time you find a cellar hole, if it's at night, you might stumble into it. But if you see a cellar hole, it's going to be a well hole, because people needed water, drinking water, just like they do today. So if you find a good home site, there's a well hole somewhere nearby. They used to be covered. A lot of them are no longer covered. Those stones are harvested for landscaping purposes on people's homes elsewhere. But it's just got to be aware they're out there. We found this hole on this one up here. in North Wyndham. It was 4 feet deep. Just, we're not quite sure what it was. Maybe there was an outhouse there at one time. That was near a homeless encampment. This was also from North Wyndham. This was just a burnt out stump hole. Where, you know, if you were actively working at fire, that would be loaded with hot embers. You could step into it and you have short boots on, you're going to get burns to your legs. So always a good pair of leather boots, as high up as you like, would prevent that or minimize that. But those, that's really just a stump burning out. Trash, propane cylinders. People are beautiful. They drop stuff anywhere and everywhere. When you're in dry periods or drought, you're going to have active wasps and bees, hornets. We have miles and miles of barbed wire still in the woods. It's slowly rusting and falling down, but there's still, it's out there. We have snakes in places, rattlesnakes, copperheads, and smoke. You don't want to suck too much smoke. That PM 2.5 is a particulate matter 2.5. It's very fine, tiny particles of carbon and or people call it soot particles. It's very fine. They're like the largest of that. The 2.5 microns is like 30 times smaller than the width of a human hair, and they're smaller than that. They go down below 2.5, and those are able to get deep into your lungs. And if you have long exposure, they can give you some pretty serious health issues. So you want to minimize your smoke exposure because you can do some serious respiratory damage to your lungs. Power lines, you guys touched on power lines earlier in presentations. You don't want to fight fire under power lines. You get smoke in there, you get phase to ground arcing. You don't want to be spraying water under there for obvious reasons. And I see I'm really running short on time here, so let me just, these are just, of all the, this is a 10-year study. They do, NWCG, NFPA do get involved with doing these 10-year studies. The last one was concluded for this time period that you see here. These are all wildland firefighters with, this is federal, state, and local, and volunteers, all what killed them in this time period. A lot of heart attacks, a lot of vehicle accidents. And burnovers is number 3. Snags 7%. Anyway. And if you go down to what's killing you folks, same time period, 37 deaths. You're having a lot of heart attacks. 38% of your fatalities are attributed to heart attacks. Not so much trees falling on you, not so much getting burned over, a lot of vehicle accidents. So vehicle accidents and heart attack. Now those are 2 things you can work on and make progress on reducing. So in the last few years, these are the nationwide, these are the total fatalities nationwide. And last year, the #1 killer was COVID. Of the 23, 6 were COVID related, and the other ones, it was less than 6 per category, but COVID was the highest category for 2021. Any questions?
All right, Kevin, so far we have 1 hand raised. Marshall, I'm going to give you permission to talk, so please unmute yourself once I do. Oh, Marshall put his hand down. Okay, Marshall. Oh, he's back. Okay, here we go.
Sorry about that. Marshall going with Muddy Brook Fire Department again. How do you estimate the size of fire in acreage?
There's a couple different ways. If you don't have a GPS, handheld GPS, you can pace it. And there's tables that we have in our little pocket guidebooks that we carry, and they come out every couple of years from the NIFC or Boise Interagency Center. We call them incident response pocket guides, and there's a chart in there on one of the pages, and that chart is also available online. You can, it's in different publications, but ours is in our pocket, and you just pull it out, and if you pace around the perimeter of the fire in chains, and you have an idea of the shape of the fire, whether it's oval or whether it's elliptical, or there's different categories that you can pick a shape. And if you know the total perimeter that you paste, you can just plug it into this table and it'll give you an acreage determination.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's an old school, but it still works. A lot of people use the GPS, or they have a GPS on their phone, and that's pretty close. I mean, they're getting better and better, the estimates with either the regular GPS units or the GPS that's available through your phone apps.
Cool, thanks.
You bet.
Does anyone else have a question for our fire folks? Okay. All right, Helena, I'll let you take, here we go. Here's a hand. Robert, I will give you permission to talk. Please state where you're from and unmute yourself and ask your question. Robert, you have to unmute yourself.
I'm Robert DiOrio from Nepog Fire, New Hartford. I want to say great job, you guys. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just so everybody know, there's one more praise in the Q&A from Bradford Silesia. He also says, thank you for the great presentation. Thank you, Bradford. We appreciate it.
All right, we have a few minutes left. And we're just going to do a quick wrap up here and then we'll let you guys go. First off, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Like I said, this is the first time we've ever done a virtual presentation, especially to this scale. So thank you for participating. And like I said, I think we had between 400 and 500 participants on it. So be sure, this is a reminder to be sure to turn in your attendance sheets. If you did not do it during the meeting, please turn them in right after the meeting so we have them. And Sheila is monitoring that email correspondence in case there's, any other attendance-based questions. Also, just to let you know that once we have all the attendees' names and everything, we will be mailing out certificates for those people who did attend, and they'll be sent to the firehouses. So as long as we have all the correct information for people, you will get a certificate. It might be a few weeks before you get it, but be assured you will get it. And also a reminder that this program will be posted on our website at a later date, probably in the next week or so. And we will also send a link out to all of the email contacts that we had here, so that if you want to go back and refresh yourself, you'll have it, or if you want to share it with anyone else. And we will post it as well in the spring letter if we are able to do that. When I close up the presentation, I will be posting our individual contact information in the program. So I'll throw that up in a minute. And I want to reiterate that we do plan on having the spring letter out within the next couple of weeks. Hopefully that will be before 3 weeks from now. Any general questions you have about anything you heard tonight or any other kind of questions you have, please feel free to reach out to one of us individually, or you can send your question to the deep.forestry@ct.gov email address, deep.forestry@ct.gov, or the division phone number, general line is 860-424-3630. And once we have all of the attendance from everyone, we will be putting all of those fire departments into a random drawing, and we'll pick 4 recipients of the WIC pumps, and we will be contacting them individually to get them their pumps. And just to kind of make that clear a little better, in case I didn't say it at the beginning. So if you had 5 people from your department attending tonight, your fire department will be entered in 5 times for the drawing. So the more people you had attending, the better shot you have of getting one of the pumps. And a couple things I wanted to just touch on again, based going back to my presentation, 2 things I forgot to mention with the prevention materials and the smoky suits. When I was talking about that, the one thing I needed to reiterate, because I don't think I said it, was that we do not do drop-offs. If you want any prevention materials or the loan of a smoky suit, then you need to come pick that up at one of those 3 facilities, either in Middlebury, Marlboro, or Voluntown. And also, I did mention that Amy is leaving and that Western District Fire Control Officer position will be vacant until we're able to refill it. But in the meantime, I don't want you to think that we're not going to have any coverage for the Western District. Rich Shank will be the primary contact for statewide fire assistance, and Kevin and myself, and hopefully our new employee soon will be the backup. So we do still plan on having full coverage for both East and West. I also need to mention that Rich had to leave for an active structure fire a little while ago. So that's why he is not joining us for this portion. But you can certainly send him, if you had any questions directly for him, when I put the contact information up in a minute, you will be able to send him any questions directly if you had anything for him. So I'm going to throw up that slide right now with our contact information, and I'm going to open it up to any of the other panelist members, or Amy Richardson or Sheila, if they have anything else they want to add as we're closing up.
Hi, Eileen. I have one thing to add. Someone else wrote in the Q&A. They are curious to know if you still supply or give grants to the Woodland firefighting gear.
If they are referring to the volunteer fire assistance program, we do still do that program. You can buy equipment, you can use it for training, and you can use it for prevention materials. And those grants are 50-50 cost share match, and with the maximum amount of $2,500 from the state, and then the fire department would have to match it $2,500. And that is the announcement for the next grant round of that should be out right around May. Any other questions?
I see a hand raised from Harry. Harry, I'm going to give you permission to talk. Please state where you are from and unmute yourself to ask your question.
Yes, Harry Segers from the Baltic Fire Department. One question, you said something earlier about don't forget to do the registration or something or other that says you were here. Where do we get that information?
All you need to do, if you were watching this as an individual and you already went through the registration process, then we should have your name, and you already filled out all the information that has your name and your fire department and your email. If someone is viewing this as part of a larger group, all we have is one contact email for that group. So we need to have those fire departments who view this in a larger group to send us a attendance sheet of who was at it, so that we can give them credit for attending and also print them out a certificate. And that list can be sent to deep.forestry@ct.gov. And that can be done right now. It can either be done, taking a picture of it and emailing it, or if you have a scanner, or sending an Excel spreadsheet. However, the list has been collected.
So for attendance on this, I've been watching this by myself at my home, so I don't need to do anything else.
You do not need to do anything.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
All right, thank you, Harry. We also have William. William, I'm going to give you permission to talk. Please state where you are from and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, good evening, folks. Thank you for the program. Bill Ivers, Chief of the Annex Fire Department. I have a question about the dry hydrant program. Do you have to come from a community with a population under 10,000 to be eligible for that as well?
No, you do not. That'll
Okay,
be open to anyone.
all right, perfect. Thank you.
All right, thank you, William. We have one more question in our Q&A box. Is DEEP actively seeking seasonals?
Yes, we are. We have 3 different job postings that are out right now. We filled a couple of the positions, but we have not filled all of them yet. You can find that information on probably 2 places. You can look on the DEEP website, and I think if you Google in the search bar something about employment, it'll come up for seasonal job opportunities, or you can go on the DAS website and fill that out. They have a master, either way, you have to fill out a master application. This is for any state job in Connecticut now. You have to fill out a master application, and then you select what jobs you want to apply for. So we do have an active open application period right now. And we would like to be hiring those positions as soon as possible.
All right, thank you. Oh, it looks like Bradford actually posted the link in the Q&A. I'm going to make that live for everyone to see. Thank you, Bradford, for sending that for everybody. So if you all open your Q&A box down on the bottom of your screen, you should be able to see the answered questions, and it looks like Bradford added that link for us. Let's see if there's anything else. It looks like Hillary, who asked about the grants, she was specifically commenting about the yellow shirts and green pants specifically. Her department received a few sets way back when after a training night, and she thanks you for your answer.
You're welcome.
Okay, does anybody else have any questions, whether verbally or typing into the Q&A?
All right, I guess if there are no more questions, then we can go ahead and end this virtual training. And again, we thank you all for participating, and I'm assuming no one else from the panel had anything they wanted to add. Is there anything you guys wanted to add? Okay. Anything else, Amy Richardson?
I have no more questions to add, but if you do open up your Q&A box, you will see many thanks from many different people. So the thank yous are far and wide tonight. So you guys did a great job. This is great. Thank you for everyone for attending.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thanks, Amy.